Mic check 1 2 1 2. Can anybody hear me? Press one in the chat. Joe Black, what's cracking? What's going on, Just One? All right, you guys can hear me. All right, welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is Geopolitics, episode 273. Hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust as well, including the community post. Ebony Knight 85, what's going on? Dark Side, what's going on? Willie Little John, what's going on, man? G Darius, what's going on? Black Scorpion, what's going on? Mark Easterling, what's going on? I'm good, fam. I'm good. How are you, Justin? I'll give you guys a few minutes to get settled in as we before we get started. Cream Austin, what's going on, man? You know, you guys should check the archives because we had a pretty dope hangout last night about Black health, Black mental health at that, and how it plays in the manosphere, the Black manosphere for that matter. Mr. Benevolent, what's going on? All right, let me see if I can find the docket so we can get started. Weird. What? Joe Black says been busy lately. You talking about yourself or you talking about the Black Brain Trust? All right, I'm not going to wait anymore. Anybody wants to join, they can just make sure you raise your hand if you're going to join the panel, or else I won't be able to see you. Make sure you raise your hand. All right, this first article is from usni.org. The Chinese military strategy casts U.S. military in Asia as destabilizing. New Chinese Defense Ministry policy paper counters the Pentagon's national defense strategy by casting the U.S. as an aggressive and destabilizing force in Asia. The recently released China's National Defense in the New Era acknowledges China and the U.S. are competing powers, but China's paper makes the case Beijing's policies provide peaceful security to a region facing threats posed by pressure from the U.S. International strategic competition is on the rise. The U.S. has adjusted its national security and defense strategies and adopted unilateral policies. It has provoked and intensified competition among major countries, significantly increased its defense expenditure, pushed for additional capacity in nuclear, outer space, cyber, and missile defense, and undermined global strategic stability, the white paper states. The white paper cites the following examples as U.S. policies that Beijing's leaders consider aggressive. The U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, which China considers a threat to its stated policy of peaceful reunification. China has not renounced the policy use of force to reunify Taiwan with the mainland. Sending U.S. Navy and Coast Guard ships into waters China claims as part of its sovereign territory. In some cases, international law does not support China's claim to the islands passed by U.S. ships. In other cases, the international policy for transiting waterways does include the same requirements. China requests such as seeking permission before transiting the Strait of Taiwan. The deployment of the U.S.-built Terminal High Altitude Aerial Defense (THAAD) ballistic missile defense system to the Republic of Korea. An alliance with Australia that continues to strengthen and engage in Asia-Pacific security affairs. U.S. defense spending that is described as outpacing what China spends on defense, though the white paper includes neither detailed information about actual defense spending rates nor a full reporting of Chinese defense spending levels. Even with the rhetoric showcasing China's defense activities as positive actions, what sets the white paper apart from the past policy documents issued by Beijing's leadership is that this time, the Chinese at least touch upon virtually every aspect of China's actual military development that is highlighted in the U.S. reports on Chinese military power, writes Anthony Kordsman, the Arleigh Burke Chair in Strategy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, in his recent report briefly analyzing China's white paper. The white paper's long section on reform in China's national defense and armed forces may go far beyond the one-page attention span of some U.S. decision makers, but it should be compulsory reading for anyone who is seriously interested in China's evolving capabilities and any real-world aspect of U.S. defense policy, Kordsman writes. Beijing's leadership warns the growing strategic rivalry between the existing superpower, the US, and the emerging Chinese superpower is already strong and will shape the relationship between the two nations for decades, Kordsman told USNI news agency News during a telephone interview on Tuesday. While the US should respond to China's white paper through strengthening its level of deterrence, strategic partnerships, and seeking ways to cooperate with China, for more than a decade, the U.S. has not had a coordinated Asia strategy, he said. You have to have a consistent strategic posture, and you have to have a clear plan that shows your allies, your forces are going to stay, and what their capabilities are going to be. Quartzman told USNI News. But above all, you have to have a relationship with strategic partners that is based on partnership and not burden sharing. Performing regular freedom of navigation operations past contested islands in the South China Sea is not a strategy, he said. The Department of State and the other US agencies need to be a part of the strategy because, for the most part, China's competition for influence in the region is economic, not military. You need some kind of stable economic strategy, Korsman said about what he thinks US policymakers should be doing. Instead, we have essentially a set of somewhat open-ended trade wars where it's not quite clear who we're having the trade war with. The lack of discussion among agencies about developing in Asia policy concerning Quartzman among low-level policymakers and planners at the Pentagon and among armed services committee members on Capitol Hill, he said there is a recognition of needing a more coordinated role of government policy. So far, he hasn't seen a coordinated plan emerge. For many years, for a long time, we could coast on the momentum of the Cold War. We particularly when you did not have Russia reasserting itself and China was still early in its emergence, Gordon said. But none of that is really going to take us to the next decade. So China has a strategy, an effective one at that, and they're willing to use it according to the policy, according to the white paper. Let me see if anybody's trying to join. No, we're good. So what's happening here is that the U.S. has pushed China into, coming up with a better strategy to counter all of their efforts in the South China, in the southeast region of Asia, and freedom of navigation, all of these sort of activities that are happening with the U.S. Partaking in that area, the region, they consider those hostile acts, they being China. So the countermeasure, is that they will start responding to a lot of these activities. Maybe you might see Chinese warships float their way through Latin America and the Caribbean. Freedom of navigation. You may see Russia and China float their, maybe their most benign warships. Maybe a Corvette, a couple of Corvettes through the Caribbean and Latin America, or even the Pacific for that matter. I mean, there's nothing there to tell them you can't travel through these waters because of the Freedom of Navigation Act allows them to actually do that. If it allows the U.S. to do that, then it should allow them to do that too. We got 30 people watching, only 19 likes. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so. And then saying all of that, all it takes is one mistake, which is how World War I got started. Somebody bumps their warship into, some reef, or some submarine gets caught in a deep water cable, something to that effect. That's all it takes is a minor infraction. Someone's daughter gets kidnapped, like the Huawei CEO. His daughter got kidnapped by Canadian authorities and brought back, extradited to the U.S. Hmm. I see if you got a thumbs down already. I find that to be very interesting because it's such a benign subject. It's not like we're attacking anybody in particular. But we'll move on to the next article since nobody else has any questions or anything to that effect. So, all right, let's go to strap four. China and Middle East. Beijing considers escorting vessels through Persian Gulf. China is considering a U.S. proposal to ensure safe passage for commercial vessels through the Persian Gulf, dubbed Operation Sentinel, according to China's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. Reuters reported August 6th. Chinese involvement in the operation could or would constitute a significant broadening of the mission, which thus far only includes the United Kingdom as an official partner. If Beijing decides to escort vessels through the Gulf under Operation Sentinel, it would also significantly increase Chinese military involvement in the region. In addition to Chinese ambassador's comments, Israel's intelligence minister also said Israel would provide intelligence and support for the program. Nevertheless, the United States has struggled so far to attract more partners for Operation Sentinel. I wonder why. Could it be that um, no one wants to get shot at in the Persian Gulf, in the Straits of Hormuz? Very hostile region. Ships being hijacked, you know, cargo ships being bombed, um, drones being shot down. That's a very dangerous neighborhood. I wouldn't want to be in that neighborhood either. I wouldn't want to sign up for something like that. I mean, who wants to be in that neighborhood if you're a military? All it takes is somebody to get popped, and that's it. Um, it doesn't have to necessarily be a drone or a big massive warship. All it takes is a few rounds from an AK-47 going off, and somebody in the warship gets popped. That's the start of a war. A lot of countries don't want to sign up for it, and there's a lot of countries who get their oil from Iran or out of the Persian Gulf. So what happens? I mean, India is a main consumer of Iranian oil. They have their ships floating, their warships, I should say, escorting oil vessels back and forth. Um, you also have, some African countries who also partake in this as well. I mean, what's to say that South Africa won't get involved in that? Considering that South Africa still has a fairly moderate military. They're no slouch. They at this point they're no slouch. They have the ability to respond to a conflict if they wanted to. They've done it several times in the on the continent itself. All right, this next article is from the New York Times. America could lose a real war against Russia, with Putin and Trump having torn up a Cold War pact that lowered the risk of nuclear war. America should build more conventional missiles to catch up with Russia and China. Let's say a photo of one of the cruise missiles. After more than 30 years, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty ended last week with an American withdrawal on Friday and a Russian withdrawal on Saturday. Although the United States abided by the terms of the treaty, Russia violated it by fielding more than 100 banned intermediate range missiles, and China, which was never bound by it, fielded thousands. The United States has none. Um, the article is behind a paywall, so I'm not even going to make an attempt to. I'm not even going to make an attempt to. Basically, what's happening here is this: the attitude that the attitude that the United States has today is predicated on a agreement that was signed between the Soviet Union and the United States back in 1987. And what is happening here is that um, NATO moved their forces from the west to the east after 1991, and at the fall of the Soviet Union. So Russia had no other sort of contingencies other than to build up its missile arsenal. Now, what happened here was that the United States government put a missile battery inside Poland, and that missile battery is very high powered and very close to Moscow. It's only a few hours away. I would venture a guess it's on the border of Russia as well, and so they kind of encroached on Russian territory by putting missiles, high, medium, and long range missiles right inside Russia's underbelly. Whereas the agreement stated that there would be no nuclear delivery vehicles within the European region, and that was during the Cold War. That was during the Soviet Union. And once the Soviet Union collapsed and the states went back to um, their normal state lids, that changed the whole entire trajectory because now they moved those missiles around without, without any sort of Russia having any sort of contingency. So Russia had no other choice but to build missiles within their own country to point in the directions that they felt that they saw that the missiles were being moved around Europe from the west to the east. And only the United States has signed up for this, not France and not Britain. So in Germany, neither Germany did either. So for all intents and purposes, all of those countries that were non-aligned with this actually can place those missiles wherever they want. If I'm Russia, I probably don't want that. So I'm probably thinking ahead. And it doesn't take much to send a missile from Poland into Moscow. That's very, if I'm the Russian Federation, I'm looking at this and I'm like, somebody has to go in there and do something about this. And their only real strategic measure is to build countermeasures from a missile standpoint to shoot all those missiles down, if not shoot more missiles back into Europe. And the first ones to be taken out will be Poland. The Polish have to be foolish to actually go to war with Russia when they're sandwiched in between Germany, which invaded them back in the 1930s. In fact, they were one of the first countries to be taken down. And then on the opposite side, they have Russia that will march their tanks right through Warsaw. Going 11. What's going on, bro? You gonna mute yourself.
Hey, Mike. What's up?
Good, bro.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm chilling. Yourself?
All right. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, as far as Russia's concerned, if they got others getting ready to point missiles at them, I think that's kind of aggressive. Russia's definitely and without question going to and it would be smart for them. Just call it. It would just be smart for them to have other missiles there at the ready. Poland, as you know, Poland, they are like the first line of fire there. So they're the ones who are going to get hit quick, hard, and fast in any type of major conflict between either Germany and Europe, Western Europe, and Russia. So Poland is definitely going to be one of the first to get slammed. And if they're pointing missiles at Russia, that's not very smart. So Russia's going to have to do what they have to do just from a defensive perspective. So I think that's shaky moves. The American and Russia's definitely going to be in a position to respond.
Oh, they'll just march it. See, the missile battery that's inside Poland is the real concern here. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of it. All right, Aegis, that's what they call it. Let me share my screen real quick so that people in the chat understand what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. This is the Aegis system inside Poland. Poland is not that far away from Russia. I mean, you're talking about New York to Connecticut sort of distance. You can't be a part of the Russian Federation and allow something like that to sit that close on your border, pointing at you.
No chance.
And they have no idea. They say it's a defensive weapon. It's a defensive weapon, but at the end of the day, it's still a weapon that can be offensive as well. So they have no idea if there's something nuclear sitting inside there. They have no idea if it's non-nuclear or not. How are they supposed to know that?
And with some, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mike.
No, go right ahead.
No, I said it's something with that type of potential lethality being at that distance to the Russian border is inherently dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's inherently dangerous. I'm going to sit there and think if I'm the Russian premier or the president, I'm going to be thinking, hold on one second. This could be a potential move to strike an initial act of war. You don't know if this may be the case now. We don't know. This could be, not to say that this is an act of war, but it could be construed as something like as a first strike capability against them. That is something you have to look at and prepare to defend yourself against very aggressively. Very aggressively. You could be tempting them to move troops in on that border very quickly, to move. I don't think I know if it does happen. Hopefully O'Shea's not around during that period. Hopefully he's not there.
Better hurry up and graduate.
Get out of here, man. Because I tell you, that shit gets hot. That's gonna be a problem. Go ahead.
Well, they consider it a hostile threat.
Of course, they have to.
Remember when Cuba was inside Grenada in 1984?
Yes,
or was it 1982?
Yes,
it was either 1982 or 1984. And Reagan sent Rangers, was it Rangers or Green Berets, to go in there and take out the Cubans, and they almost got their asses handed to them. But the point of the matter here is that they saw Cubans inside Grenada and Barbados as a threat. And
well. If you remember that, and shortly thereafter, they took down the Grenadian president, killed him.
mhm, mhm,
Okay, and I was watching, like I said, I was watching this shit on the news. It was
mhm.
and that's how that went down. So yeah, I mean, this is a very, very, very serious business, and we know that anytime you see any type of aggressive military hardware or troops or anything close to your border, these can be construed as potential acts of war. It could be construed that way. It could easily be. So that's a problem. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, let's use for example, back in the 1980s again, the Move movement in Philly,
yep,
where you had black people looking for sovereignty inside of a house, and those people, the police department bombed them with a helicopter.
dropped an incendiary bomb through the roof, and their intention was to burn them out, and consequently went and burnt up, man, over a block long of properties and so forth. I remember that on the news, and people saying, "Oh, their hopes and dreams were tied up in those houses and everything else like that."
Oh yeah.
And folks got burnt out, and I think it was Mayor Good, who was the mayor of that state, a brother as well, or a black man, I'll
Mhm.
say, did that to his own people, just as a side note. But yeah, but the minute people start seeing something that could be, a problem in close proximity to their lands or their interests,
Mhm.
um, is going to cause a problem. We've seen that. We've seen that not only just in on land. We've seen that in the seas and so forth. So not a good move here. Not good. Unnecessarily aggressive, in my view. Poland does not. I don't believe Poland still has the ability, even today, to be able to deal with, a Soviet invasion or attack. I don't believe they. I don't
Right,
believe
you
they.
mean a Russian invasion? If
Uh,
anything,
well,
yeah.
I call it Soviet. I'm sorry, I can't keep thinking old school.
Mhm.
A Russian invasion. I don't think they would be in a good position to handle that at this stage.
If anything, they'll send a demolition team to go in there and take that out. Russian special forces to go in there and take that out. Keep in
And
mind that
you talking about the Spetsnaz and these guys.
Spetsnaz, yeah,
Yeah,
either Spetsnaz or they have several new groups that they've made in the last 2 years since they've been in Syria. They figured out some new strategies, so they've updated it in 2018. So
yeah,
they changed their military to reflect that of the U.S. military, for that matter. So they're mirroring a lot of what U.S. activities are. So instead of having one big broad military of all these soldiers, they have all these special groups that are
yeah,
capable of doing all types of activities, man, including demolition work. So these guys go in there and take out that building, whether it's with ATGMs or C4 explosives. Is going guys that can blend in, go in there, take them down, and beat the hell up out of there as soon as possible. And that's the sort of game that's going to be played.
yeah, yeah. A dangerous one, a dangerous one. But the Russians are, I'm sure will be highly skilled at this.
Mhm.
So I don't know, not good, not anything I'd want to see going on in that theater. And
Mhm.
if it does, what kind of conflict, kind of conflagration we're looking at.
This is a shield. I mean, this is a an image of the NATO missile shield. So the same missile battery that we were talking about earlier, the Aegis, it's in Poland, it's in Romania, it's in Turkey, and it's one in Spain. The command center is in Germany, probably in Stuttgart.
Mm,
What I'm saying here is that look how close it is to Moscow and Kaliningrad, as well as Belarus. Belarus and Kaliningrad are two states that are completely aligned with Russia. Russia has troops all in these states.
Yep. Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Yeah, this ain't no game, man. A
Oh
lot of
no.
people think. Mhm.
Oh no. And this is the thing. We've seen what this kind of looks. We have seen what this kind of looks like before.
Mhm.
We have seen this. We have seen this in the 20th century. We've seen it at least twice.
Mhm.
Um, we've seen it. Not a good scene.
Mhm. All right, this next one is from The Hill. Princeton professor, we are in a cold civil war. Princeton professor Eddie Glaude Jr. responding on Sunday to the shooting deaths of at least 20 people in El Paso, Texas, said the U.S. is in the middle of a cold civil war. What happens when we use language like infestation, Glaude said on NBC's Meet the Press, you set the stage for people who are even more on the extreme to act violently. We are in a cold civil war, and there are some people who bear the burden of it, Glaude added. We have children in El Paso right now who just witnessed their friends and family members shot down because someone thinks there's a Hispanic invasion of the country, which is almost the exact same language of the president of the United States added. He added, get rid of this. The suspect in Saturday's massacre at a Walmart in El Paso is alleged to have written a white nationalist manifesto ahead of his attack. Numerous Democrats and 2020 hopefuls condemned President Trump's immigration rhetoric after the El Paso shooting, noting his own frequent references to an invasion by migrants, particularly ahead of the 2018 midterm elections. Fellow NBC guest and former North Carolina Governor Pat uh, McCrory on Sunday denied rhetoric by critics of immigration played a part in the shooting in El Paso and defended the use of the term illegal immigrant, which Glaude said was part of the dehumanizing language that inspired the shooter. A separate and apparently unrelated shooting occurred in Dayton, Ohio in the early hours of Sunday morning. So a cold civil war. It's an interesting term. What do you think about that, Nicole?
A cold civil war here in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's been going on for quite a while. I just think really right now it's just bubbled more to the top than it has before in the past. I certainly think it's always been low intensity, but we really saw the real feelings of many of the far right wing really out front during the Obama, when the Obama years, the Obama election, and the savage turn to the right, which frightened a lot of black people, which had a lot of black people saying, "Oh, let's get with the right wing and all that as well." And
Mm-hmm.
the pusillanimity of our community, started to show fairly fairly strong in many respects during that period as well. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's come to the top after the Obama years, and now you have a reaction. Now you have this guy out here in the Klan, and all these guys are stating that they're backing this up and they're taking their country back, and all that rhetoric that they were talking about. They're fairly serious about that. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, we have to take that seriously as well. I mean, if you look at our country's history and you just look through the past and look at the many terrorist attacks that have gone on blacks and others, where most of them have been actually unprosecuted and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, this is definitely going on. I think the president has shown poor leadership on this. I understand he's trying to cover his base, but now we're looking at what's best for all the people, and he doesn't seem to be able to to handle those two juxtaposing ideas in his mind simultaneously and work with them equally. He's not able to do this, from what I can see, and which I think is it's problematic for us. We need some real leadership here. And, I don't think we've seen it, and I do believe that you have the far right elements who are looking at it as the last hurrah, if you will, or are prepared to go a little bit further than some of us are really thinking that they're prepared to go. And I think we need to be very aware of this and not put our heads in the sand on this anymore.
DE Raptor, what's going on? How are you doing, brother? Shalom.
Good evening, shalom. How are you guys doing? I'm okay.
DE, what's going on, baby?
I'm good, bro. I like tonight's chat, man. It's interesting. But Nagon, I'm gonna disagree with you for one reason. I agree with you with the rest of it, but one point you made that I disagree with is that the president is not showing leadership. He is showing leadership. If you look at it,
in qué manera? In which way? How?
He is showing leadership to the people who he wants to show it to.
Oh, you talking about to his base?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I can agree with that. Okay.
Yeah, because if you look at his actions, I mean, from giving money, look at what he did to Wall Street. Zero. I mean, every corporation in America has got a balance sheet that's loaded with cash. I mean, they might have a lot of them borrowed a lot to buy back their stock, but he probably sat down with them and told them, look, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to give you this money to prepare. The farmers, I mean, if you got a farm, if you're a Caucasian farmer, not a black farmer, they're still going after black farmers. If you're a Caucasian farmer, they're pushing money in your pocket, like forcing you to take the money because of what they're doing. He's going all around the world attacking the people who these people see as taking away their lunch. Will it be the only people they haven't gone after yet too much is Brazil. They're still on the low. If you bring in something from Brazil, say, I don't know, something that's made in Brazil, the customs find you with it, they will still take it. But they're not going after Brazil in the way that they used to. Argentina is the same thing. I think they're trying to get these guys to come on this, their talking points, to start talking the same points as they're talking. But he's actually, look at the other day he went after France. He went after Mexico of all people. I mean, he's going after Honduras after he installed his man. After the U.S. installed their people in Honduras. You know what I'm saying? So it is. He's like, how would I put it? No, he's to us. It looked like he's not he don't.
I think DE Raptor.
I'm not talking about Unigon, but the average black man on the street. He only sees something when a lot of people got shot up, like last week or so, or when they attack a church in a black community, and a lot of white folks come out and start saying, we stand with you. But he is, I mean, lockstep with his base, bro.
Well, listen, I understand where you're with your base, but now you have to be president. And what I'm saying is, when I bring up the point of two juxtaposing ideas, you have to take a look at your base of who you got to support. Now you have to look at the general safety of your people, of your republic, and what risk are they in, and how do you balance those two and deal with both?
Your republic is safe. You know what I'm saying?
It takes some talent and skill. Well, you're saying the republic is safe for now, but things could get incredibly or indescribably live. We don't know. So I'm just saying, hey, I'm just leaving it out there. I'm just putting it out there.
Not really, bro.
Well, you
in
say
the
not really?
community
I
in
don't know.
Central Florida, where I live, every police department got a battle tank, a few of them. Serious. The community where I live in has got 100,000, well, Coco has got like, what, 150,000, you know.
Okay,
Titusville has got so.
but you
Palm
got
Bay has got
guys
a
out
few.
here.
Melbourne has got a few. But these police departments are armed like our military.
Yeah. They are, but you also have people who are rolling around with Stinger missiles, anti tank weaponry. You have people with armor piercing rounds. They still have them. People have stockpiled them all before the black towns and all that kind of stuff like that. That people have stockpiled before they made them illegal. They have them in skids in their cribs. All right. Okay. You have people who are getting their arms directly from the United States military,
Military, exactly.
black and white. Okay.
Yes, they are.
People who are playing that game. So as all that you say is true, yes, I do agree. But there are going to be those who will be able to deal with some of this. So you have people with 50 cals and this type of stuff. You have some ill shit going on out here, and a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of people are not aware. Some people are sleeping, and I'm saying, the way things have been moved in this country, and I look at this country's more center right than center left. I believe you can pull this thing apart. I certainly believe that this can happen. The possibility of that happening here, I think, is greater than we might want to believe, and that's why I myself do not sit around and think that it's everything's hunky dory. I don't believe that.
No, it's
And
not hunky dory. Yeah.
and what shows me so much of this is that I look at the constant killing of these of the killers, the killings that are going on,
Yep.
and people want to keep talking about, oh, these guys are crazy, and oh, this, that, and the third. Guys ain't crazy, man. These are terrorist acts. These guys are not out of their minds. People would like to say that. They may be a little bit unhinged, but you've got a lot of them slightly unhinged people running around. I see them running around in my gym every day. but
I mean, you were born in this
we
country.
do have a lot of people who are strategically planning some of this stuff. And Turner Diaries and all the stuff is out there. People take the stuff like these guys are real crazed. But I'm of the belief that some of the people are not so crazy, and that some of these people are looking for this. And
Well, you were born here, right? You were born here in this country.
You know it.
And you are one of the people. When I talk to you, you know your history. I mean, you know it. I mean, you got details that I can. When you say this and this and this and this, I can say Nagon is right, because I'm looking from what I know and reasoning to what I don't know, and the little bit that I know, you filling in the details, kind of. So you know this thing that's going on since what? Let's go up to the Civil War. After the Civil War, this has been going on since after the Civil War. They start making all kind of laws that allow them to take out whoever they don't like. In that case, it was a lot of black people. Yeah, but they took out the Irishmen, they took out the Italians, when they feel like it. They pick and choose. Today, it's the immigrants. And from the president's mouth, he's been saying the immigrants are the bad ones. The immigrants are the bad. The immigrants are the bad. The immigrants are the bad. The immigrants. So they're going after the immigrants. If you look like an immigrant, you're in trouble.
I gotta get to the next article.
I just want to say this very quickly. They look at you and me as immigrants as well, if you understand what I'm saying.
I got you.
A foreign body outside of what they want.
I got you.
All right, this next one is from RT.com. Russia's new heavy drone Hunter performs maiden flight, Defense Ministry. The Russian state-of-the-art heavyweight combat drone Hunter has successfully performed its maiden flight, the Russian Defense Ministry has said. The flying wing type unmanned aircraft has hit the skies after taking off one of the test airfields and stayed in the air for about 20 minutes. The ministry told the Russian media without revealing the exact location of the test flight. It flew over the airfield several times at an altitude of 600 meters before making a successful landing. The technical specifications of the brand new UAV will remain a secret, although some media reports suggest it boasts a takeoff weight of between 20 to 25 tons in an operational range of 5,000 kilometers, while being allegedly able to operate at a supersonic speed of 1,400 kilometers or 870 miles per hour. The ministry has not provided any photos of the video or the videos of the flight so far. A model of the drone was earlier exhibited at the Army 29 Expo held in Moscow region in late June. 20 to 25 tons. DE, your former Air Force, what can you tell me about a drone that can carry a payload of 20 to 25 tons?
Bro, if I was living in Poland, let me pull up my map here. Seriously, if I was living in any place along the Russian border where the U.S. put its so-called weapons that's supposed to defend against Iran attack, you know, then like Putin told them the other day, we're gonna go after you and the person who put you up to this. And this weapon right here is like, can you imagine that weapon flying at, I would say, 1,000 feet off the ground? It can hit you. I mean, if the Russians know where your tactical weapons are, it can hit you, leave you destroyed, and move on to the next target before you knew it. You know what I'm saying? That's like the U.S. built the F-22 to do something like that, and it's not fulfilling the promise. But this right here, I mean, it's a supersonic. This is, I mean, I'm laughing. It's like this thing is like a F-15 or F-16, but without the crew. You know what I'm saying? If I were the president of Poland, I'd be telling the U.S., you know, that every time the U.S., I'd be pushing back. Serious. I'd be pushing back. And if this is a weapon that it not only carry missiles and bombs, but it can be configured to support like close air support for like you were talking about just now about the Russians creating these groups that if they wanted to go into Syria and take out somebody, that thing can be flying around at, say, I don't know, 5,000 feet, just monitoring. And you got a guy with goggles on the ground flying it, providing close air support for the crew that's in there doing whatever they got to do. And then when it's finished, somebody else can take over and fly it out. They don't have to. They don't have to operate from Moscow. That's what I'm saying. So this is a good weapon, and if I was I'd be paying attention to this, serious, because most of our drones are not like this. The ones that we have that are built like this are built for spying, flying over your territory at 60, 70,000, taking photos and send it back.
Nicole, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I think that's pretty accurate. This is fast, moving stuff out. I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm kind of siding with with the Raptor on this one.
Well, speaking of Raptors, which is one of the U.S. drones, the biggest drone that the U.S. has is the Global Hawk that was shot down over Iran recently.
Yeah,
and
true.
this is supposed to be twice the size of that thing.
Yep, that's what I'm looking at. And the speed, our Global Hawk is nothing close to the speed of this thing.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's got endurance too. 5,000 kilometers.
And see, this is the thing I'm thinking about now. Now I'm just putting this out there because I know about, I know we have classified super high velocity jet fighters right now. That they're not talking about in the media, though, hasn't been uncovered. Well, poorly hidden secrets, I would say, some, as we know, the Aurora and so forth. But I believe we have drones that are functioning not too far off that. I think we have. I think there's some stuff out there that we may not know about, man. That may be exceedingly butter laid in how it can, in its speed and how it can deliver ridiculous ordinances. So I don't know, fellas. I think we're the last guys on the deal team, as they say. We're getting this information late. I'm just speculating, but I have to figure that it would be out there. I've got to figure that. This right here, why can't they make something bigger and even faster than this? More powerful, deliver that much more payload.
The U.S. government, the U.S. military is saying that the biggest drone that they have is the Global Hawk. So if they have something better, then they're not. There's nothing to show of it. But I know that the Air Force has a space drone, but it's nothing comparison to this, because it's not really the same class. But what the U.S. has in terms of drones is half the speed. It's not even half the speed. It's 1/3 of the speed of this Russian drone, and it's nowhere near the payload capacity. I mean, 20 tons is a lot of weight.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous payload. 20 tons. That's ridiculous. That's over 40,000 pounds. That's ridiculous. That's huge. That's massive. But I'm suspecting that we might have it. I mean, the only reason why I say is because good friends were in the Air Force and all that. And I remember when we first heard about the SR-71 Blackbird. By the time we heard about it, that son of a bitch was almost getting ready to go into mothballs. Yeah, retirement, man. So by the time we understood that, we started making toys, and I remember we had a SR-71, styrofoam aircraft that we could fly on the campus and everything else like that. It was highly buttlerly. These craft were getting ready to go into retirement, and then we've got the new generation stuff that we haven't seen much of. And then we know of the Aurora and so forth that's out here that's, just doing ill shit. So I'm thinking we're just releasing a certain level of information on this drone, on the drone technology. I don't think the drones are too far behind it. I would like to see more. What these Russians are showing right now is ridiculous. But I think that we might have something that will close match it. I would have to believe that we do. It may be highly classified why we're not seeing it, but we would see maybe some more classified stuff than Russians have. That our stuff that's on the same level we wouldn't see.
I mean, they were using robots in Syria recently, last year. Russians had a robotic tank inside Syria that went through trials. They tested it in Syria just for that very purpose, to take on these jihadis, and they said it passed with flying colors. This is an autonomous tank.
But Mike, I mean, you're in IT, and I understand IT industry very well. What would be, you're gonna set up a heads up kind of display, or you're gonna set up a system inside of a tank, but yet you're controlling this thing from 100 miles away or whatever, and you know, or let's say if somebody could control it and just roll a tank through, or now you just have a tank now that's got, you know, AI technology in there that, you know, can just make all kind of moves and decisions and just rock and roll. I mean, you know, why shouldn't they be able, you know, why shouldn't they be able to do this? I mean, we've been talking about this for 40 years.
Well,
Being able to do this kind of thing.
Well, keep in mind that Russian Federation's military is different from the United States. They have a very low capacity of human capital. Same for
they have the same kind of money,
all their branches and services. Whereas the U.S. military is really just based on capitalism. So whoever makes the latest and greatest toys, you know, the generals sign up for it. But what I'm saying here is that Russia has a necessity to build these sort of autonomous weapons because they don't have the manpower to go out there and actually take on anybody, or to take on the U.S. in that way. So it's asymmetric warfare for them. So when they tested these, these devices in Syria, the only real way to say that it was battle tested was to actually put it into a battle zone.
Put it into a battle in the battle.
Yeah, the U.S. really doesn't look at it that way. They're saying we have a new toy and here it is, and look how shiny it is, and then they sell it off to a lot of countries like the F-35, and then it costs them a lot of money, and then they have to shut these planes down. So there's a little bit of a difference in variation of how they look at military warfare. So the Russians actually took almost a full-scale tank and added the controls to it, and it's dead accurate. We actually did a hangout about this last summer. I know myself. We covered it in the 35 caliber cannon on it was 99.9% accurate on its targets. So we know that and this was last year that they were doing this. If you're talking about right now, I can't imagine where it is. They said it back then. It was a woman who was engineering it.
So that thing is spitting out 35 caliber shells?
Oh yeah, dead accurate.
Are explosive tips, or this would be depleted uranium tank?
They never said. They just showed the tank firing down range, and it was accurate, 100%, almost 100% accurate on every grouping.
That's horrifying. Anyway,
yeah, it is. And there was nobody in the tank.
On a weapon like that, you gotta have like at least, I was at the minimum 2 types of ordnances. One that can hit a hard target, and when I say a hard target, I mean a reinforced target, and one that can hit a soft target. It might be a bunker, and these shells just destroy the building. It hits the building, and it's like you get a percussion, what a percussion grenade would do. You get this huge like sound that destroy the bricks and everything that's built up. And then you have one that hit a hardened target and go right through it to detonate what's inside. So a minimum of 2 types of weapons that should go on it at least. But one of the things that Putin has done since he took over, is that he changed Russia from a nation who saw America as the only target, with the Europeans, as if they come over the border, we will crush them too, which was defensive in Europe and a kind of defensive or offensive in America. And now Putin is saying, look, if you attack us, our weapons are going to be offensive weapons, period. But we are not going to attack you. If you attack us, you are not going to survive either. You know what I'm saying? By the time you launch your weapons, we are not going to second guess at all. We're going to put our weapons in the air, and they're going to find you wherever you fire that weapon from. And we're going to destroy you, period.
MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, just with the nuclear theater out here right now, and I'm starting to think the sheer raw military power will not, will at the end of the day will not really confer a great deal with these types of. We have very small nuclear weapons that we can use in small areas and so forth. So, and all these countries have them, and we have stuff that we can fire nukes that we can fire right out of a tank. So, I don't know. Country to country, it's one thing if it's civil, internal conflict. It's one thing. But like you say, this symmetric or asymmetric type of warfare that we're going to get engaged in with drones and nuclear missiles and all this kind of stuff. I don't know, man. I'm looking at I'm looking at the Stone Age. I'm looking at the Stone Age again, fellas.
Look, right now we're in a war, right? But what they're doing is they fight an economic war. They're trying to avoid this total nuclear weapon destruction scenario that you were talking about. And they're just doing it economically, and they're still killing a lot of people. it's killing more people than died in
conflict would.
Yeah,
I think big nations conflict, big national conflicts with nations, big powerful nations. I think I'm starting to look, and I'm looking at all this military stuff, and I look at this. I read online this military hardware stuff that we have, and the whole space game that's going on, the satellite, and how they're tracking everything about. I don't know really, man, if this type of warfare is practical anymore. I don't know if it's practical. I just don't know if it's practical. I don't know if it's a practical way of dealing with our differences now. I just don't think that it is. I think the damage and the collateral damage from this kind of from these kind of potential conflagrations will be in some respects unimaginable.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of that autonomous tank was to be able to load it inside of a one of the cargo planes, man. One of those IL.
Yep. Or C-130s, or even those old ones, and just drop that subbitch out, and
Well, for the Russians, for the Russians, is drop it behind NATO battle lines, and basically bust right through.
Yep.
And anything that the that NATO had set up, because you drop off. I think they had squads of like 20 to 25 guys. You take 10 guys on one side of the tank and 10 guys on the other side of the tank, man. And the tank is just basically escorting them, but it's going to fire off on everything in its path, because it's guided by satellite, and it's also autonomous. So it already has a mapping system in place of that nation state that it's going to be partaking in the theater with. And that's that's crazy, because if it knows the side streets and all that stuff, man, and the tank is small enough to get around, and it has that much firepower behind it, backed by some soldiers, that's that's game over for a weaker country like let's say Estonia or something like that.
For sure. A country that doesn't have that that ability, or you would have to find maybe a way of maybe stopping that tank, but before it can do certain kind of. And there are ways to do it. I mean, I saw that in the beginning of Battle of Fallujah, where they why it took so long for us to win is we came in there with a lot of tanks, but they made sure they brought you in where there was a lot of deep sand. The tanks actually got bogged down, and it slowed them, and they couldn't move. And then the Iraqi forces were able to come out and fight, and did a pretty good job. Tied down a very powerful army by utilizing the features of the earth and the ground in which to adversely affect the functionality of these vehicles. Maybe they'll be able to do that as well. To disable these types of tanks. And human ingenuity is beyond what just a machine can do. So there's some ways of maybe countervailing it, but I would consider it to be a very formidable weapon. if you can really employ that in the battlefield. It would seem to me to be very formidable. Very formidable.
Yeah, it takes time to get a. I've never been in the Army before, so I'm not really familiar with land warfare as many would like to think. And what I'm saying here is that to get a big main battle tank up and going, it probably takes a considerable amount of time. It's not like you jump in there, put the keys in, and then go. That's not how it works. You know, you need your commander, you need your gunner, and then you need your driver, right? If you don't have all three of those things ready, you know, an autonomous tank coming down your path, it's not waiting for anybody. It basically already has instructions in place. It's going to take you out unless you stop it first.
Yep. Yeah, and if you put it behind your, if they put it behind your lines,
and you're talking about roll up into your flank.
Yep.
Roll up into your flank. You got a problem.
You got a problem.
If you're flanked and these bad boys are moving at who knows what speed that they can move at, say 30 miles an hour on the battlefield or so, 30, 35 miles an hour.
Those tanks, tank was moving at 65, 70 miles an hour. There's nothing in it.
It might be. I'm saying, but it depends on the terrain and how where it's going, how fast that might mitigate.
This was on dirt. On a dirt path, it's moving at that speed. On the street, it's moving almost considerably faster. So,
but at 70 miles an hour,
yeah, it's a pretty light tank.
And that's the true essence of a blitzkrieg. So that's highly problematic, dude. You would have to, you run a tank into a battlefield where they would sink them somehow or something else like that. But something like that's on clear ground, moving at that speed, that's a problem. That's a huge problem.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from CNBC.com. U.S. Ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, will resign, could run for governor in Utah. Maybe he's going after Mia Love. The American ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, will resign and return to his home state of Utah. The former Utah governor had sent a letter to the White House on Tuesday morning saying he would step down. His resignation effective October 3rd, according to the letter obtained by NBC News. The White House and State Department did not immediately respond to CNBC's request to comment. Huntsman, a 59-year-old Republican who was Utah's governor from 2005 to 2009, could run for office again in 2020, according to the newspaper. He left office in 2009 to become President Barack Obama's ambassador to China, and later mounted an unsuccessful bid for the GOP presidential nomination in 2012. Trump has faced relentless criticism for U.S. relations with Russia. He has repeatedly praised Russian President Vladimir Putin and said he believes in the strongman's denials that Moscow did not interfere in Trump's 2016 presidential election victory. Trump has insisted that he wants to have a good relationship with Russia, which can be a formidable geopolitical foe for the U.S. In Huntsman's resignation letter, he wrote that we must continue to hold Russia accountable when its behavior threatens us and our allies. He added that through our diplomacy, we have worked to stabilize years of acrimony and incertitude with the hope of a better relationship. If he decides to run for governor, Huntsman would face Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox in the Republican primary. I want to make something clear. The U.S. Department of Justice actually found, or at least AG Barr and Comey did not find evidence of Russian interference. They said this in front of a hearing, and they've already presented that there was no evidence to be found that there was any sort of Russian interference involved in the campaign itself or in the elections. So with that being said, I don't know why they keep spinning this idea that Russia interfered, despite the fact that your agencies have already stated that they did not. And with that being said, John Huntsman, he seems to be all over the place. I'm not sure what he plans on doing. I mean, he's only 59. He could considerably run in 2024. I don't know.
I think that's what the Republicans are setting up to do, run for 2024.
Mhm.
If they expect Trump to win, and then they expect him to come in and carry out Trump's policies,
Mhm.
but not act like Trump. And I think that's what they're planning.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, good evening, Dr. Phoenix. Dr. Phoenix, actually, you're welcome to join the panel. What are you going to say, Nicole?
No, I was gonna say nothing. I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, John Huntsman is a very special character. He's ambassador to China, ambassador to Russia, but doesn't seem to. I guess he could say in his presidential run, if he was to run in 2024, that he has considerable experience, foreign policy experience. Unlike Nikki Haley, who her only foreign policy experience really comes from the International House of Pancakes, which she used to eat at. So we'll see what happens.
Huntsman is a businessman, you know that.
I have some experience.
Flapjacks, boy.
Well,
That's a foreign policy experience. International House. I'll have two of those, please.
Oh my God.
Can you please pass the butter?
The strawberry syrup, man. Come on, let's do that. Oh my God.
That's her foreign policy. Lift that fork and put it in your belly. Yeah, I know people are looking for Black Gnostic to be on the panel, but he had a long hangout today, so I don't expect him to be on the panel today. At least this panel. All right, this next one is from the national interest. How one rocket nearly destroyed a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. Big tragedy averted. The crew were not trained to know. I'm hearing some feedback from somebody. The crew were not trained to know the cook-off temperature of the weapons they were handling, but several mentioned their concerns to a nearby audience chief and other personnel. However, they were either preoccupied with fusing bombs in the time for lunch, or he couldn't hear what was being said over the noise by nearby jet engines. A series of collisions involving U.S. Navy destroyers in 2016 and 2017, including 2 incidents this summer that left 16 sailors dead, have raised questions as to why the maritime fighting branch appears to be suffering the same accident again and again. However, it can take time for organizations to learn from mistakes and implement solutions to deal with them. This fact was illustrated when it took no less than 3 catastrophic fires on U.S. aircraft carriers between 1966 and 1969 that killed more than 200 sailors before major reforms decisively improved safety on board the giant flat tops. The final article in a 3-part series looks at the last incident, which occurred on the USS Enterprise. All 3 of the disasters were triggered in part by rocket munitions. In 1966, a magnesium flare tossed into an ammunition locker caused rockets to deteriorate on board the USS Oriskany, killing 44. Then in 1967, a Zuni rocket mounted on a fighter on board the USS Forrestal accidentally launched due to a power surge, blasting into the side of an A-4 attack jet. This began a chain reaction of detonated bombs and jet fuel that threatened to consume the conventionally powered supercarrier. However, the last 2 incidents occurred while the crew were undergoing the stress of launching dozens of jet aircraft a day into combat over Vietnam. Such was not the case for the USS Enterprise, as she cruised 70 miles northwest of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on on in January 1969. The 1,100-foot-long Enterprise was the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Escorted by the destroyer USS Rogers and the missile cruiser USS Bainbridge, the supercarrier was undergoing flight drills in preparation for another deployment to Vietnam. At 6:45 a.m. on January 14th, the carrier began launching a mix of F-4J Phantom fighters, A6 and A7 attack planes, and E2 and Ka-3 support aircraft. By 8:15 a.m., there were a total of 15 aircraft prepping for launch on the flight deck. These included Phantom Fighter 405, which was loaded with 6 500-pound Mark 82 bombs and 2 LAU-10 rocket launching pods, each containing 4 unguided 5-inch Zuni rockets. As usual, an MD-3A Huffer, a tractor mobile heating unit used to warm up jet engines, was positioned on the starboard side of the fighter, ready to prepare for it to take off. However, several crewmen noticed that the exhaust from the Huffer was gusting onto one of the Phantom's rocket pods only 2 feet away. At that distance, the heat would have amounted to more than 320 degrees, while Fahrenheit while the Fahrenheit the Huffer was idling. The crew were not trained to know how to cook off temperature of the weapons they were handling, but several mentioned their concern to nearby ordnance chief and other personnel. However, they were either preoccupied with fusing bombs in time for launch, or he couldn't. What is this? Screen is jumping all over the place. I'm not sure why. Despite 4 different surviving crewmen admitting afterwards that they were aware of the unsafe position of the Huffer, nobody acted on the situation in time. The Zuni rocket employed by a Composition B warhead composed of 60% RDX and 40% TNT, with wax that was prone to cooking off when exposed to roughly 350 degrees of heat. M65 bombs were made of Composition B, had inflicted the lion's share of the damage in the Forrestal fire, and the Navy was then in the process of converting to more stable Composition H6 munitions. I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's pretty long. At 8:18, the exhaust heat triggered the 15-pound warhead of one of the Zuni rockets. The resultant blast ruptured the Phantom's fuel tank, which poured burning Jet P5 jet fuel onto the deck, catching 3 more Phantoms on fire. Amongst the first victims of the conflagration were 2 operators of the Huffer unit and the F4 pilot. A horrible chain reaction unfolded, similar to that which had occurred on the USS Forrestal. The heat from the burning fuel caused 3 more Zuni rockets to explode after 2 minutes, blasting a hole into the aircraft hangar below, allowing burning jet fuel to pour in. This is pretty horrific. DE, have flown planes in the past for your previous life. I mean, this is supposed to be a picture of it as well. Not that I'm laughing at it. I just find it interesting that you're going to war and yet you're getting bombed without even touching the enemy.
I remember we were warned about that. Oh shoot! Yeah. We were one of the classes that I had to take. Since one of the airplanes I worked on was the F4, and in the cockpit dealing with instruments, you can't be looking around you to see everything. And that Huffer, if I had to spin up an engine, we used to have to put the Huffer on the opposite direction that the wind was blowing. the wind direction can be blowing into the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're at sea, that aircraft is facing into the wind. And some of those, not only the bombs, but the missiles. He said that they had a little munition that he had to screw into the. I don't know if when you look at a aircraft, you see the bombs are loaded in like two on the side, like at horizon, and then one on the south. There was a little cartridge that you put in there that they used to get fired to push the bomb off the aircraft, to release the bomb. Some of those things used to go off too. The heat from the huffer, the heat from, the static charge from your hand sometimes can set them off. And you don't want one of those bombs rolling around on the deck. And especially, and the F4 used to have a tank, a center tank. We used to call it a drop tank.
Yep.
And when that thing comes off, bro, that's the one that they took off and claimed out with. Then they drop it and continue to the target. And that thing is loaded with fuel. Sometimes, depending on where you're going, it would have two of those tanks on. And I can imagine the fuel pouring into the hangar bay below deck, and those guys have no place to run.
Yeah. If
no
you didn't get
place to run.
If you didn't get burned, you must have died from smoke inhalation or
not only that, the scent from the fuel, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding you. I thought I can stick my head inside one of those tanks and hold my breath. And when I stick my head in the tank, I was holding my breath. Then when I took my head out of the tank, my head was still, I was still lightheaded. So you can understand, it's like, I don't know if it went through my pores and where it went through in my head, but I wasn't breathing. I know I wasn't breathing. So that fuel, when it gets inside there and it fills up, it like takes out all the oxygen out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the oxygen, just the fuel alone, takes the oxygen out of the air. And then when it goes off, wherever, every little corner on that flight deck, below deck, it's going to be burning.
Mm-hmm.
Serious. So I can imagine what it was like on that carrier.
And you're going to war. And keep that in mind, you're going to war.
Yeah. And you were the one who was getting killed by
comment on the previous article you guys were talking about, because it goes hand in hand with DE Raptor was just discussing. The brother Nagone brought up Fallujah. I was in Fallujah, so when I went to Iraq, it was literally the week after Reagan died. I was supposed to go the week he died, but died, and they made the whole week a national holiday, so they pushed it back a week. But to make something really clear, being in tanks, being part of a tank, being part of a tank crew, being a driver, whatever the case may be, tanks are very dangerous. Tank warfare is extremely dangerous. And Nagone had brought up what was going on in Fallujah. It wasn't that you had rollovers that were going on, even though they were a massive problem with tanks. The M1 Abrams, they actually use JP40 fuel because they have turbines. The motors are turbines, so that's why a tank can move as fast as that tank can, given the kind of firepower that it has, because they're turbines. But the armor on M1 Abrams, which was the primary tank that was used within Iraq, is composed of depleted uranium. The outer layers depleted uranium.
Yeah.
And so the problem with Fallujah was that you literally had to fight a war block to block. which the military had never fought before. Why? Because every single road was lined with IEDs. When I got there, they hadn't started using IEDs. The insurgency had not started using IEDs. They didn't start using IEDs until maybe I was in Iraq, maybe about five or 6 months afterwards. That's when because when I got there, we didn't have none of those armored vehicles that people were saying. No, we had the old school Humvees, the fiberglass. They fall apart. You shoot at them. You know, but anyhow, with that said, was that when tanks catch fire, the depleted uranium armor itself is pyrophoric. So in the presence of heat, it ignites. So what happens is that you get all of these fumes from the depleted uranium. We're talking about really poisonous, noxious fumes that are being given off, not just by the burning fuel itself, but also from the armor. And so because I was a medic, we had to go through special training to do tank extractions, because it was very dangerous, and it was a high likelihood if a tank got flipped over, they were probably gonna die. If it caught on fire, very good chance they were gonna die. Most folks who got caught up in those situations did not make it. And the other part of that was because they started to use IEDs in Iraq. They had something called EFP-based IEDs, which stands for explosively formed projectiles. And so basically, it was kind of almost like a shape charge, where you have a piece of really pliable metal like copper that will get superheated, and it will form into a hypersonic projectile, and it will literally cut tanks in half.
Wow.
I've seen instances where people never survive, because what happens is that you kind of think about whenever you shoot a weapon and the round comes out of the chamber, so you have this back pressure. So once the round hits a solid object, it goes to the object, but that back pressure creates a cavitation. So everything behind that round kind of gets spread out. It's called cavitation if you're dealing with anatomical terms. But basically, that's what happens if one of those EFP projectiles hit like an armored vehicle or anything like that. It literally cuts them in two. And so again, the tanks as a whole are pretty much death traps, to be really frank.
Kind of iron coffin, right?
Yeah, it was funny because my roommate from college, fraternity brother, my boy Victor, he and he's out of the military now, but he retired as a colonel. But he he was a tank commander. He was in the tanks.
Dangerous job.
And he called it. These guys were in there. We got out in the early '80s, and then he went to the military, so he moved up very quickly. So, all that stuff that was going on before, and Desert Storm and Desert Shield and all that, he was all caught up in that. I was so nervous for him. I was like, Vic, listen, man, you can come hide out at my house, man. Come hide out at my crib. I'll hide your ass. Forget about it. I don't want you over there. I don't want you over here getting blown up. Seriously, man, I was really that worried about it. And he was like, well, I'll be in the tank, and we're going to be kind of busy. I was like, oh shit. So, soon those tanks are ferocious, moving around, but the minute they get hit or something,
they are proverbial death traps.
Okay. So there's no way out. You got to hold the top. There's really no way out of it.
Yeah, I saw the documentary, and they said that they had no way to prepare for IEDs. So a lot of their vehicles first coming in, man, were basically.
I guess I'll let you all look. I'll just kind of put this out here. I was on one of the first teams that was looking for WMDs, and so I was a medic, and so I provided medical services for the it was a PSD attachment that was for an international EOD team. And so we went all through Iraq looking for caches and all this kind of stuff. So this was right at the beginning where you saw the insurgency start to use IEDs, and it was they've never seen anything like this. I mean, literally, even before I went over to this team, because this was a special order that came down directly from the DoD, from the Pentagon, and And before then, what they used to do, they would go out every night. And I used to have to do this when I used to go out on nightly patrols with the infantry group that I was with. They would go out with metal detectors. This is the old school way of how combat engineers used to look for IEDs and mines. They would go out with sticks and metal detectors on routes because we broke up the roads, the streets, and we called them routes. So we call them stuff like Route Irish or whatever. And, you know, these routes go, you know, north, south, west, east, whatever. And literally you go out there for like 12 hours. I'll be out there with them 12 hours at night. I'll always hang out in the back because, you know, something happened. I ain't getting blown up out there. But they would go out there with sticks and metal detectors and literally go up and down these routes. We talking about miles of routes every night over 12, 13, 14 hours sometimes. Just looking for IDs. We'll find them every time, man. Guaranteed. They'd never seen anything like it. In fact, when I went over to the security detachment that I was with, we had these things called warlocks. They were jammers, so they would jam the signals that they would use to detonate IEDs, or they had these other kinds of IEDs called daisy chains. So basically, one would go off, and then you have a chain reaction of others, or they set traps where you have one that was kind of like a fake one, and then you'll keep driving ahead, and then you get hit by a big massive one. And I'll just put it to you this way: this is how I got my CMB, was because we got attacked and ambushed by some folks with IEDs. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah.
But yes, I mean, so in reference to that, did you have anything you want to add about the Russian autonomous tank and autonomous drone?
I mean, it's a go. I mean, if you can remove people from the tank, I mean, tanks are 100% effective. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go. I don't know if they still have these videos, but in the early days of YouTube, man, they used to have videos of people getting ran over by Abrams all day, man.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Ran over insurgents, man. I've seen, man. It's been plenty of times we got called out to spots. I mean, people are just smears on the road.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen that stuff.
I mean, there. I mean, if you can remove the human element from tank warfare, it's game over. I mean, again, Abrams themselves are pretty fast, but yeah, I think in the article, because I kind of came in at the tail end of it, sounds like these can go about 70 some miles per hour. I mean, that's
we covered an article last year, Lino and myself, about Russian military hardware, and they were testing an autonomous tank with 35 millimeter cannon and 57 millimeter cannon on board, and all of them were 99% accurate on their targets and their groupings. And they also have something called a tank biathlon. So basically, all these militaries come together once a year, like an Olympics, and test their skills on battle tanks. And I think Russia won the first one. I think China and Pakistan were actually pretty good. But now this year, China is actually winning. So what they're demonstrating is that tank land warfare capabilities of U.S. adversaries are actually pretty even, if not better than the Americans. And when you take out the human element, like you said, and you put autonomous tanks in there with all these algorithms and mapping capabilities and stuff like that, and they're small enough to be put inside of inside of one of these IL-70 cargo jets and just dropped off behind enemy lines. Man,
that's a problem.
The more the human element you can remove from, especially ground warfare, air warfare, very different, but certainly the more the human element you can remove from ground warfare, in particular tanks, because of just how dangerous they are in operation. I mean, again, one way in, one way out. If you can remove that, plus sound like that this autonomous tank that Russia developed can go at least twice the speed of some of the fastest tanks out there. I mean, again, we're talking, that's a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty horrifying. I mean, you're talking about an exceedingly deadly battlefield at that stage, and
it's wow. It's not a main battle tank, but it can actually take out a battle tank, a main battle tank. So, I mean, MBT, man, you can hear that thing coming on solid ground.
I mean,
fight
country.
this.
I know there was a couple brothers. I know there was a brother in the chat. I can barely see, but contrary to popular belief, they don't go for tracks on tanks. Tanks are actually pretty weak. Believe it or not, they're pretty weak from the rear. That's probably the that's probably the weakest point of a tank is the rear. It's not the tracks. I mean,
I would have said the bottom plate as well, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Again,
that's where the IEDs were hitting them. But
that's where
that was true in Vietnam as well with the tanks back then. So that's a classic weakness. They're weak from the rear.
M113As.
Well, that's where your engines are at, and that's typically where your fuel tanks are at. So again, if you have tanks and you know that the outer layer of armor is composed of depleted uranium, I mean, all it takes is for a fairly significant heat source. We're talking JP40 here that has a pretty high heat point. So
volatility of that fuel is really bad.
Yeah, it's extremely volatile. And you were just talking about I mean, it takes is one spark and everything is burned up. It acts like it's damn near napalm.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where they got it from, and that's why they used it in Vietnam.
You used to spray that thing on it. Yeah. They would drop the remember I told you guys that the F4 sometimes will fly with two tanks. They have a main tank and fuel in it. And that
jettison
the fuel with napalm, the second tank.
Yeah,
they come in and lay waste that whole area. You hear this thing go whoosh.
Yeah, one of my mentors, he's a retired family practice doc, but he's also a former Air Force pilot. He used to fly the tankers, and he teaches a lot of young brothers now. He teaches them to fly, get them their pilot license and stuff like that now. He used to tell me stories and stuff like that because he was actually back in the Gulf. He was in for quite a while, but he was a major, I think. But anyhow, he was in the Gulf War, and he would tell me all kinds of crazy stories about some of the crazy stuff that was going on even back then. But I mean, D is correct, man. The volatility of the JP fuel is, all it takes is one spark, and everything is burning.
Well, in accordance to that article about the aircraft carrier going up in flames like it did, and with a big hole in the center of its of the deck. I don't know. I mean, this is in the middle of going to war in Vietnam. You take into consideration gold, dollars, and power with the, with all the economic catastrophes that were going on back then. The United States was very vulnerable. You take the civil rights movement. You take on the Black Panthers. You take on all these other resistance groups and everything else. If I was a white man, I would be shaking in my boots, big time, man.
That's why they took out Martin Luther King. You got to look back on. I mean, they're going to tell you, a lot of the young Caucasian kids were beginning to join the Black freedom movement, and when their parents saw this, and when the government saw this, they had to come down hard. I don't know if you remember Kent State. Kent State is when they started to clamp down on things.
Great point. And also when you had Goodman, Swerner, and Cheney. Goodman and Swerner were two white people. They were Jewish as well.
They were about to overthrow their own government.
And when they got killed, that's when you saw that's when everybody started getting involved in this thing. And it really started taking on a much bigger thing. And a lot of white folks were coming in. They killed Luella Luizio, that's what her name was, also, who was driving for them as well. They killed her, and they called her a nigger lover and all this. And white folks started getting lit up. That's when everything started to go Hollywood, literally. Yeah. And that's when things really started changing the movement. That's when real power came in there. Real serious kind of deep stuff. But yeah, man, that's pretty accurate there, D.
That's where Johnson gave our generation, our generation, the generation now that you say, you know what, money, throw money at people. You see where CEOs now are making millions and millions and millions of dollars. That's how they converted these young kids back to capitalism. give you, you know what, you can do whatever you feel like doing. We're going to pay you as much as we, you know what I'm saying? They brought him back.
That is crazy, man. You know, they don't ever talk about, you know, that part of the military. Talk about USS Liberty, talk about this these two aircraft carriers. All the, I mean, there was a myriad of blunders that the U.S. military and the U.S. government was involved in, man. Chinooks crashing places and um, just all
Our,
types of.
our shortcomings, if you look back at it, if the Russians at the time knew about the shortcomings of the U.S. military, if China was a strategic military might that it is now, in those days, the U.S. as a nation would be teetering right now. I mean, when I say teetering, it would be almost fighting for its life, because the Chinese like to take advantage of shortcomings. And the shortcoming, the Chinese like to look at everything and probe everything. And the Russians didn't do that. What the Russians did was if the U.S. built a tank, they built a tank. The U.S. built a airplane, they built an airplane. It was just like defense. But we had a lot of shortcomings, and people never talk about that. The newspapers wouldn't talk about it. The people who knew would not talk about it. They just talk about the great advances that the U.S. were you know, space race. You know, we can go into space and we can build the SR-71. You know, IBM was you know, that's what the U.S. is good at doing, presenting the best image that it can to everybody who wants to see the U.S.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from USA Today.com. Iran seizes another foreign oil tanker, state media says. Another foreign oil tanker was seized in the Persian Gulf. Iran state media said Sunday it was the third such ship to be detained by Tehran amid high tensions between Iran and the U.S. after Washington renewed sanctions on Iran's oil exports. Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced it detained the ship's foreign crew for smuggling about 885,000 gallons of fuel from Iran, according to the semi-official Fars news agency, which cited state television. 7 sailors were detained. No details about the crew's nationalities or who owns the ship were given. The ship was reportedly seized near Farsi Island, a small barren enclave in the Persian Gulf. It is the second ship in less than a month seized by Iran for allegedly smuggling oil. Iran also has detained a British flagged oil tanker, the Stena Imperial, after it allegedly collided with an Iranian fishing boat and then failed to stop. The Trump administration renewed sanctions on Iran's lucrative oil industry after pulling out of a year ago from the nuclear deal between Iran and world powers. A Revolutionary Guard statement said the newly seized vessel has been taken to Bushehr port and its cargo turned over to the National Iranian Oil Product Distribution Company in Bushehr province, according to the Fars and Meher news agency. The Trump administration said Wednesday it would sanction Iran's foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, a move likely to ratchet up tensions and narrow the window for dialogue with the Islamic Republic. The decision came after weeks of heated rhetoric and confrontation between the U.S. and Iran as the Trump administration tries to squeeze the regime economically and isolate it diplomatically. That effort steadily intensified since Trump withdrew from the 2015 nuclear agreement. A diplomatic break has now become increasingly fraught. So that's a pretty strong move to put sanctions on a foreign minister that you're supposed to be talking to. Now you can't have a conversation with him because you took his money. Very interesting. That very interesting that this is all happening at this point. I feel like Iran is actually in a pretty strong position. I mean, if they're capable of taking oil tankers and firing missiles off, man, I don't know if I would want to get into a shooting war with these guys at any point. Right now, if I'm the British, I wouldn't want any smoke.
I would have to agree. I think Iran, we've talked so much, bomb, if you remember, may he rest in peace now, but McCain talking about bomb Iran, thought it was funny and all that. So people were kind of been goofing on Iran for a long time. And, certainly after, Iran's war with Iraq, and then them coming in and filling the breach when we kind of screwed up in Iraq after. I think Iran has really been, amping their game up. I think they're kind of ready. I think they're in some respects. You did give me some news a couple of weeks ago. You said that the Iranians, the Israelis actually were able to invade their airspace without being detected, which I think that might be a fairly significant breach. But on the whole, I think they are preparing, or at least understanding they're going to be prepared possibly to fight some forces. I think they are. I think they are prepared. I think they are preparing themselves for warfare. I think they are prepping themselves. And Britain and so forth. I know they have a good air force, and they've got their tornadoes and all that. They've got some decent forces, but are they ready to really get live like that right now? I don't know. Iran looks like they've been threatened a lot, and it seems like they are prepared for a lot of the threats that they've been threatened a lot. Somebody threatens you a lot, and you're going to start preparing. So I agree. I agree that they may not be. They may be a pushover, but I'm kind of doubting that they won't be.
E-Raptor?
One of the things that I noticed about Iran is that they learned from what Iraq did. Well, they learned. They learned. The Persians have a long memory. I am not kidding. It's like China. It's like
they have civilization.
Well, they have a long history as well. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. But they learned from that war with Iraq, and they said they can't trust the U.S. While they were making everybody believe we going after nuclear weapons, they were actually improving their technology. Mm-hmm. And when it's only after the U.S. signed the treaty and Iran start doling out money to France and Germany, China, wherever they can get the best technology from, and begin to use it. Not only use it, but improve on it. That some people start saying, hey, these people don't really need nuclear technology. They're building a force that doesn't need nuclear technology, but soon going to surpass Israel.
Well, we can never forget, A.Q. Khan, who really knew how to, who really was able to spin up, a lot of that that nuclear fuel and really get a chance to really get those nukes going. And then Pakistan, got their nuke that way. You got to figure that came over to Iran. You got to figure they.
Oh yes, it did.
You got to figure that they could.
Yeah. You don't remember that Iran's helped to pay for it? They didn't build it in their backyard. They built it in Pakistan.
They built it in Paki. That's what I'm saying. So I'm sitting there saying, Iran's got they've got that shit, man. I think they're ready to rock and roll. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Go ahead.
That's smart, bro. That's what you do. It's like getting the North Koreans to do certain things that some people don't want to do. The other people don't want to do. You know what I'm saying? China can't push around, can't push certain buttons, but they stand off and wink at North Korea doing it. And North Korea push Japan's button, and push South Korea's button, push the US button. and see how the US react. And then China said, you're saying the Russians and the Chinese will look back and look at these things. So that's what Iran is good at doing this. Dr. Phoenix is just talking about the IEDs. These guys came up with that.
Mhm.
Iranians, you know what I'm saying?
They trained the Iraqis on how to plant IED and everything else. So they supplied them with munitions to do it. In Afghanistan as well.
Yep. So,
Yep.
They also taught the Palestinians how to do it as well. So I mean, if you're a country that's under siege, you're going to do whatever you have to do to survive. At least according to the United Nations Charter, they have the right to resist.
but the funny thing is that they don't use this technology to like invade other countries. They didn't go into Iraq to invade Iraq, even though they had the technology after the US to take over Iraq. They
No,
didn't go into Syria.
they filled in the breach. They filled in the
Hey.
breach, man. They filled in the breach. We came in there, screwed up, and left a big hole there, and Iran was just waiting. Iran was just waiting to fill the breach.
But
Very smart. They're very smart on their part.
Okay, look at their proctors in Lebanon. They don't send these guys to attack Israel. You understand?
No.
They don't really send out people to go say, well, go attack this person or go attack this person, go attack this person. They make the technology and they say, if they come, we're going to use it. If they don't, we just have it. And that's what they're doing. They're improving on their technology. Everything that you see them build is like an improvement on something that, like the drone that they shut down from the US, they turned around and made one. So,
all right, let me get to this next article. This next article is from Stratfor.com. Iran, Russia, countries sign memorandum on defense cooperation plan joint naval drills. This is let me see if I can get behind the paywall. Iran and Russia have signed a memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation, while both sides are planning to conduct joint naval drills in the Indian Ocean before the end of the year. TASS reported July 29th. An Iranian official initially said the exercises could include the Strait of Hormuz, but government sources later said the drills would be confined to the Indian Ocean and the Sea of Oman. The announcement underscores the increasing military cooperation between Russia and Iran, although the exact location of the joint naval drills will be crucial in determining their security impact, as an exercise in or near the Strait of Hormuz would likely draw significant international opposition. Russia, which has been supporting Iran amid increased US pressure following Washington's withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, deal in 2018, has been looking to expand its economic and security links with Tehran to gain a source of leverage over Washington. So, Russia and Iran joint naval drills, defense cooperation. I mean, we were just talking about Iran on their own being significant, a significant force. Now you're talking about adding the bear to the mix of a hijab. Imagine that, a Russian bear with a hijab on his head. This is significant because now you're talking about advanced military in a developing military working together. I mean, nothing but good is going to come out of this for them. However, if I'm Saudi Arabia, if I'm if I'm the Emiratis, I'm probably biting my nails saying, what the hell are these guys going to do now? Although they have Saudi Arabia has a considerable military, but they can't even beat guys in sandals in Yemen. So I don't put too much stock in Saudi's military at all. Especially their naval or maritime security operations seems to be pretty dismal as well.
Can you imagine the Houthis having as much having the capabilities that the the Lebanese have? What would happen?
Which capabilities would that be?
Like the they have created some of their own rockets with the help of Iran, and they can.
Who are you referring to? We say they who?
Oh, the Iran's proxy in Lebanon.
Oh, you mean Hezbollah?
Hezbollah.
Okay.
If the Houthis had the capability of Hezbollah, the Saudis right now would be running for their lives. But the Houthis are mostly not pushing the war into Saudi. Yes, they do occasionally hit Saudi with rockets, but they're not really pushing that war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Keep in mind that Yemen bought quite a few considerable arms from North Korea in the 90s after the Soviet Union collapsed. Yemen was one of the satellite states of the Soviet Union, so they had considerable relations between the north and the south of Yemen before it merged into one state. So they estimate there's probably about 10,000 Scud missiles and similar missiles sitting inside Yemen weapon caches that haven't been fired. They've only fired a couple dozen of them. So if Saudi wanted to get into a war, if they wanted to amp up the war, they could actually do so, which is pretty interesting because you got guys who don't even have full military gear, basically running around in Tevas and Crocs on their feet, firing off missiles into a nation state that's pretty strong, considerably strong, and Saudi Arabia doesn't have a response to it. And supposedly they get in all the intelligence from British intelligence and Central intelligence in the United States, but doesn't seem to be helping them at all. I mean, a couple of Scud missiles have already landed inside Jeddah and the other outside of Riyadh. So it's only a matter of time before one of those missiles touch down on Aramco's facilities and takes it out completely. It takes them offline and crashes the Saudi economy completely, and spirals them right out of control. Because once a missile drops down on your infrastructure like that, that doesn't get fixed overnight. That's something that takes time to, it takes months, if not a couple of years, to actually fix something like that. One big missile or one considerable missile actually takes out your main portion of your infrastructure, especially your drilling portions. To drilling this down, man, you're screwed.
Yeah, what would that do to the... Sorry, go ahead, man. What would something like that do to the world economy? I mean, the other day, Trump just said, you know what, you're going to put these tariffs back on, and the Chinese let their currency drop just a little bit to see what the reaction of the world economy would be. What would you think the reaction would be to the world economy? I mean, Wall Street would be in chaos. Mm-hmm. If suppose something like that happened on the closing, just before the closing bell. Mm-hmm. The morning when we wake up, Wall Street be starting off at 2,000 points down. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So and the Saudis be scrambling to figure out how to stop these, the Saudis and the people who support them be scrambling to see how can we stop this. Not just only start, but how can we keep it from happening again, mm-hmm. and rebuild?
Well, I mean, that's their only economy. I mean, it's not like they it's not like they have anything else left. I mean, it's not like they're digging up gold or anything like that. Um, you're right about what that would do to the global economy. That's probably what they're afraid about, afraid of. So
Yeah.
maybe they should pull out of the war. I mean, might be an idea for them. What a foreign policy that would be.
Well, in
I guess.
reality, that they can't. In reality, they can't because the U.S. got them committed to it.
Mhm.
Since the U.S. can't go in themselves, and they tried it a couple of times, and anyway, the U.S. can't go in themselves, and so who's got the money? That who's only people there has the money to do it. Israel can't do it. So guess what? Saudis has to.
All right. Next article is from nationalinterest.org. This photo just me. This photo means just one thing: a submarine just sunk an aircraft carrier. Very scary, scary photo. To prepare its submarines to hunt and sink American aircraft carriers in some future World War III. During the Cold War, the Soviet Navy ordered its hundreds of sub captains to get as close as possible to U.S. flat tops and stay there. The U.S. Navy routinely surrounds its multi-billion-dollar carriers with escorts, including surface ships and submarines, but the defense screen is not impenetrable. A photo depicting an American nuclear-powered submarine poking its periscope above the waves within shooting distance of a British aircraft carrier during a war game is a useful reminder of one of the most important truths of naval warfare. For every sailor who's not in a submarine, submarines are real scary. Stealthy and heavily armed, subs are by far the most powerful naval vessels in the world for full-scale warfare, and arguably the best way to sink those more obvious icons of naval power, aircraft carriers. The public may not fully appreciate submarines' lopsided combat advantage, but the world's leading navies sure do. Today, Chinese, Russian, and American submarines, among others, are busy sneaking up on tracking and practicing sinking rival fleets, flat tops. The provocative photo see here depicts the mast of the U.S. Navy attack submarine USS Dallas near the carrier HMS Illustrious during a naval exercise in the Gulf of Oman on October 3rd, 2013. 6 warships, including Dallas and Illustrious, conducted an anti-submarine warfare exercise that saw Dallas stalking Illustrious while British and American surface warships and helicopters attempted to locate and sink the undersea vessel. Neither Navy has published the results of the exercise, so it's not clear whether Dallas got close enough to in the course of the war game to simulate firing a Mark 48 torpedoes at the flat top, which at 22,000 tons displacement is one of the largest ships in the Royal Navy service. But there are good reasons to assume the 7,000 ton Dallas did succeed in pretend sinking Illustrious. In 2007, HMCS Corner Brook, a diesel-electric submarine of the Canadian Navy, sneaked up on Illustrious during an exercise in the Atlantic. To prove they could have sunk the carrier, Corner Brook's crew snapped a photo through the periscope, and the Canadian Navy helpfully published it. The picture represents hard evidence that the submarine was well within attack parameters and would have been successful in an attack, boasted Commander Luke Cassivi, commander of Canadian Submarine Division. Corner Brook, a former British submarine displacing only 2,400 tons, is no more capable than Dallas, and probably much less so once crew training is taken into account. American submarines or submariners spend far more time at sea than their Canadian counterparts. Dallas and Cornerbrook scored their simulated carrier kills against Allied warships in the context of a scripted exercise, but many other close encounters between subs and flat tops have occurred between rival nations deep at sea, in a usually bloodless duel that is nevertheless deadly serious. To prepare submarines to hunt and sink American aircraft carriers in some future World War III, during the Cold War, the Soviet Navy ordered its hundreds of Navy captains to get as close as possible to U.S. flat tops and stay there. The U.S. Navy routinely surrounds its multi-billion-dollar carriers with escorts, including surface ships and submarines, but the defense screen is not impenetrable. In 1974, a Soviet IL-38 patrol plane spotted what was later described as the carrier USS Nimitz in its escorts off the U.S. East Coast. The ship's identity is in doubt, as in 1974, the brand new Nimitz was in the water at Virginia shipyard and still being worked on. Whichever carrier it was, some Soviet commanders instructed an intact submarine to track the flat top and its escorts. 3 days we followed the Nimitz. Navigator Pavel Borodulkin told Tom Briggs, an American who visited Russia decades later. Borodulkin implied that the sub spent much of the time at a depth of 120 feet. As for being detected, we did not worry, Borodulkin said, explaining that American sonar was not optimized for detecting a target moving on the same course and speed as the vessels doing the searching. Our stealth was high, Borodulkin said. To prove his claims, the navigator gave Briggs the above blurry photo of a flat top snapped through the Soviets' sub-periscope. That wasn't the only NATO carrier the Soviets tailed. In 1984, a Victor-class Soviet submarine played cat and mouse with this flat-top USS Kitty Hawk off the Korean Peninsula. The Americans lost track of the Victor, and in the dead of the night, the 80,000-ton carrier actually collided with the 5,000-ton sub. I felt the ship shudder violently and going to the starboard side. I could see two periscopes and the upper part of the submarine moving away. Kitty Hawk Captain Dave Rogers told the Sydney Morning Herald. A Japanese patrol plane later spotted the apparently damaged Victor limping away at 3 knots. In November the same year, illustrious, then a young vessel, passed within 500 yards of a Soviet Tango-class submarine during a Royal Navy exercise off the Scottish coast, according to the Robinson newspaper. I'm not going to read all of this, but this is something. I'm not a military person, but I would be highly concerned that these guys are popping up in your battleship rings, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Are you there, Mike?
Yes, I'm right here.
Okay. In today's world, I would say
Your mic is breaking up a lot.
Okay, can you hear me now clearly or no?
No, your mic is breaking up a lot. I'm not sure what's going on with your microphone.
Yeah, brother, it's breaking up.
Okay, let me get off.
Yeah, just log off and log back on.
Yeah, I'm not a don't I know a few folks that were on submarines and such like that.
Lionel being one.
Yeah. But if I remember correctly, didn't you have to be at a certain depth in order to launch? And that usually at that point, you know, the radars at least should be able to pick them up, but it sounds like that's not happening.
So there's caveats in launching an attack. So you can be at 120 feet, which is actually considerable. But if you're moving at the same pace as the ship and you're putting out the same, I guess, noise footprint,
Yeah.
it probably doesn't pick that up unless you're at a different, you're on a different plane or a different course.
Yeah.
So with that being said, man, Soviet, so not Soviet, but Russian submarines popping up in every single place. This isn't the first time we've read something like this. We've read about maybe about a dozen articles about Russian submarines popping up in NATO and U.S. military or U.S. Navy operations, and just in the last couple of years.
I mean, yeah, I think something to keep in mind is that, you know, I mean, I guess historically speaking, Russians were typically the leaders in submarine technology. I mean, it's not really surprising if they would have such capability. But I also think too is, you know, I think most of what happens in the U.S. is that most of that defense budget, even the black budget, that's part of the defense budget. I mean, a lot of it really
for
gets.
Africa. Is that for ADOS, black budget?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that gets focused on like dealing with the Air Force. I mean, the U.S. maintaining air superiority, and so I think what happens is that the U.S. has left itself open. I mean, again, going back to the article about the autonomous tank that's designed to take out other tanks, you know, and now this. I mean, again, we're seeing very clear areas of where the U.S. has some vulnerabilities, at least in their military, in terms of their military might. So I mean, there's no question about it. You know, the air superiority, the U.S. reigns supreme. There's no one that's, you know, technically gonna touch that. However, you know, we're seeing sort of, you know, ground warfare. Warfare at sea. I mean, again, we're seeing some very gaping holes in strategy and just technology, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of interesting because I mean, the U.S. spent billions of dollars on this Lockheed Martin Zimmerwaltz sort of stealth warship that doesn't even work. They bought 32 of them. Only 4 of them actually only 4 of them have been produced. What happened to the rest of them?
That's a good question, because I remember reading about this for years, but I mean, you've been hearing about this stuff. Probably going back to the early 2000s, you were hearing about these stealth warships, and like, oh yeah, they're in development, and you know, there's, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars that got poured into this, and you know, again, you know, but such is the nature of warfare. I think what happened is that, you know, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, specifically Iraq, it has a very dubious moniker of being known as the period in which America has created the most millionaires. You know, a lot of people think it was the dot-com boom. It was actually the Iraq War. That was the time in the history of this country where America created the most millionaires, because I don't, you know, a lot of folks do not understand how much money really got spent on waging war in Iraq, especially. I mean, they spent 3 times the amount of money in Iraq than they ever did in Afghanistan, even to this day. And so I mean, again, I mean, what we're seeing here is that, yeah, you know, saw some cats, a lot of things that were promised that didn't come to fruition, and so yeah, you know, right now we're just kind of dealing, you know, there's just the consequences that we're seeing. You know, Russia is able to come right up under, you know, U.S. warships and pretty much blow them out of waters if they decided to.
And not just pop up in their battle groups. They're floating up and down the East Coast. I remember it was probably during the Bush administration that they found a Russian sub off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
I you know, I remember hearing about that, but you know, just keep in mind, I mean, we seen some pretty major military failures over the last decade or so. I mean, if you just remove Iraq and Afghanistan from the situation, I mean, how many stories did we hear in the last 5 or 10 years where you had nukes, you had live nukes being flown over U.S. Airspace. I mean, we yeah. You literally, there were stories that were coming out where you had there were flights with live nukes.
What's the typical process to carry that? Is by land?
I'm not entirely sure, but I think you're not supposed to be carrying live nuclear weapons over in U.S. airspace. I don't think so. I think it might be transported by land. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I do know there was a number of stories that came out over the last decade or so that talked about it. I mean, you had generals in the Air Force that were getting not only reprimanded but getting relieved of command.
Wow.
So I mean,
somebody has to sign off on it. It's not like, well, what is that over there in that crate? Oh, that's a nuke. Okay, we'll load it up on this C-130. And we'll take it to West Coast. I don't understand that whole entire how that conversation would even work. Somebody has to sign off.
Me neither. And I assume it would technically has to be a general of some kind to sign off on that, given just sort of the really sensitive nature of what you're dealing with here. So I at least my take on it would be that it would also explain why you've seen these stories over the last decade or so. When this happened, you had generals being relieved of their command. But I mean we've seen a lot of there was, if you go back to some of the early days in Iraq, I mean, you've had stories coming out of Iraq. You had billions of dollars disappearing. Nobody don't know where the hell it went. Billions of dollars. I mean, this is very well known.
Well, somebody had to pay Halliburton to move those batteries on that flatbed. Those AA batteries for those night vision goggles.
2.3 trillion unaccounted for.
Yeah, I mean, there you go.
Trillion.
Just gave us the number right there.
Trillion. We're talking trillion.
Yeah.
Do you know how astronomical that number is?
I mean, that's what they're saying. They owe black folk ADOS now.
Well, I just want to put this out there.
But that's
okay. Hey, do you know how long it would take you to count to 1 billion?
Yeah.
How long would it take you to count to 1 billion?
I don't know.
30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
That's how long it would take you to count to 1 billion.
Wow.
How long would it take you to count to Dusty Beta Male Coon?
Oh, Mike, you are too much. You know how long it would take you to? Oh, Mike, come on, Mike. I swear to God. Anyway, you know how long it would take you to count to 1 trillion?
Yeah, I don't know, a couple centuries.
30,000 years.
Oh wow.
30,000 years. Okay, so you're looking at astronomical numbers. Astronomical.
I mean, yeah, just considering that. I mean, we're just the stories you're talking about, how the U.S. I mean, the whole purpose of this discussion tonight is about how the U.S. could lose war. I mean, there's just so much inefficiencies and corruption built within the defense system itself.
It's purely corrupt.
I mean,
purely corrupt, and then also a lot of this money is funneled off to go into very special projects that you've got. I call them uncles or nephews of Uncle Sam that have their own budgets that you don't even know about, that are developing things that you have no idea of. That are part of the military.
So this is
operating, doing God knows what.
But this is their way of transferring wealth to the rich, right? I mean, $2.3 trillion, disappeared. I mean,
it just didn't go in people's pockets, their bank accounts. It went into all different other kinds of projects.
It's been spread out all over the place.
Yeah, it's involved in all kind of shit that you have no idea of. This is wild, real wild. People have to think. You have to think about what the government you're underneath and who's running it. And when shit does break wide, where the wheel's really going to fly. That's a big question. That's a big question. $2.3 trillion is a lot more than most small countries or medium-sized countries' GDPs.
Yeah.
Gross domestic product, GDPs. This is the kind of dough we're talking about. That's on the counter for. This is not a small thing.
I mean,
astronomical numbers. Astronomical. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr.
I was just gonna add to what you were saying. Just basically, I mean, if we're talking about how you've seen these inefficiencies and how the U.S. naval system is operating, how they're not prepared to deal with more advanced Soviet submarine technology. Literally, they're in your backyard. They're right up under you. We're at the point now where you could potentially in the next few years you can potentially see automated tanks, which again, removing the human element from something like that makes land warfare even more dangerous. It takes it to a whole nother level. It just be some 20-year-old kid sitting in some place far away, controlling the tank like it's an Xbox Live game. But I'm not gonna go into there because but the point is that you see how China, Russia has been spending their money and where their budget. I mean, for years we've been hearing how the F-35 just sucked up all this money.
Same thing with the Zimmerwalds. Here you have a warship. It's supposed to be stealth on the water, most advanced of its kind. Order 32 of them, only 4 show up. Where did the other 28 go?
Man, crazy.
Yeah, somebody made a lot of money off of that.
A real funny thing, back in the early mid part of the war in Iraq, I mean, I knew cats that they were getting Blackwater contracts, they were getting Halliburton KBR contracts, because you had Halliburton, but the subsidiary KBR, which were the ones who ran the show over in Iraq. But I remember you used to get this tax. It was tax-free money. I mean, folks throwing a couple $100,000 at you for like a year. I've seen it. I've seen folks get like 100+ G's thrown at them for like 9 months tax-free. And I mean, it was just all kinds of money that was just getting handed out like candy. And again, we're discussing sort of how we've seen that this country has been in a state of war for the last 20 years almost, certainly for the good majority of my life, and yet we see where some critical areas where the U.S. military is lagging behind compared to its competition.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me hit this last article, man. This one's from nationalinterest.org. An Air Force pilot explains how his F-16 was shot down in battle. The missile had blindsided me coming up through the cloud cover below me. It had struck the plane's underbelly, hitting one of the fuel tanks and cutting my F-16 in two. Wow. On June 2nd, 1995, U.S. Air Force F-16 pilot Scott O'Grady, call sign Basher 5-2, was flying a standard 2-ship formation with Bob Wilbur Wright, call sign Basher 5-1, as the lady pilot to keep peace in Bosnia. Both pilots were assigned to the 555th Fighter Squadron, or the Triple Nickel, of the 31st Fighter Wing from Aviano Air Base, northeastern Italy. It was another routine combat air patrol in which they were flying on an oval pattern over northwest Bosnia. As explained by Captain O'Grady himself in his book Basher 5-2, the true story of the F-16 pilot of F-16 fighter pilot Captain Scott O'Grady. There were no there were no fixed missile sites along much of the route.
Oops, sorry.
Mute yourself, brother. We knew to stay far away from the Bosnian Serbs, SAM rings to the north and to the east. SAM surface-to-air missiles were a definite threat to an F-16, even with our high-tech defense systems. But there was a mobile site that had not been spotted by intelligence units. O'Grady recalls Basher 5-1, Mud 6, bearing 090. Wilbur radioed to me on our open frequency. He wanted me to know there was possible threat radar to the east. Basher 5-2 naked, I shot back. That told him my threat warning system hadn't picked up anything. On the same open radio frequency, I listened for Magic, NATO's nearby airborne command center. Equipped with special intel electronics, the airborne center served to help pilots as an early warning system. In touch with spy satellites and U-2 spy planes, Magic could tell Wilbur and me if there was an active radar from the surface-to-air missile rings to the north and to the east, as well as in any other location. If the radar was coming from the north and the east, we didn't have to worry because we were out of the missile's range. The blip on Wilbur's threat warning system would have been a false alarm. It took Magic only seconds to get back to us. Basher 5-1, a calm voice called over our radios, your Mud 6 reported is uncorrelated. Magic was saying that they couldn't really confirm where the radar was coming from. Cautiously, Wilbur and I continued to fly out our ovals. At exactly 3:03 p.m. Aviano time, my threat warning system showed a bright blip. I stared at my console in disbelief. At the same time, an alarm shrilled over my headset. I had been spiked by a threat radar. Forget any threat from the north. This was coming from due east, just like the one Wilbur had picked up. Could it really be a second false alarm? My stomach did a flip. Basher 5-2, Mud 6, bearing 090. I said into my radio. Basher 5-1, naked. Wilbur reported back, our roles had been reversed. It was now my turn to be hunted. I knew I had to prepare myself for the worst. 2 missiles were fired by 2K-12 Cub, NATO reporting name for a SA-6 Gainful, mobile surface-to-air missile launcher without radar assistance, so the Serbs avoid being detected. The Serbs turned on the radar when the missiles were just seconds away from O'Grady and Wright's jets. O'Grady continues, through my canopy, I scan my skies for any evidence of a missile. The actual rocket that fires a SAM leaves a trail of white smoke. That smoke is a pilot's only chance to make a visual identification. Once the rocket turns off, the smoke stops. Then the missile sails on towards its target, silent and deadly, at a speed almost twice as fast as my F-16. Seeing nothing in the sky, my eyes swarmed back to the video display on my threat warning system. The bright blip had not gone away, which meant I was still being spiked. A moment later, a second alarm blared over my headset. My glance jumped back to my screen. A new warning was there, brighter than the one before. This was all happening in seconds, split seconds, but it was long enough for me to understand I had just been locked up by a target tracking radar. This was the type that guided a missile into to its target. While I didn't know it, Magic had received information from a spy satellite that there were 2 missiles right below Wilbur and me. But because of a garbled radio communication, we never got the message. It hardly mattered. My instrument panel had already delivered the bad news. I was in somebody's deadly sights, as I thought As I thought out the morning of those words, I realized a missile might already have been launched. I was angry that we had all been outsmarted by the enemy, but I tried to stay calm. This was the this was what our years of training had prepared us for, and I was ready. A programmed voice, a programmed voice from the plane's computer system rang out over my headset. Counter, counter. A second later, a brilliant red flash lit up the sky between Wilbur and me. A missile had passed between us, just missing us both. My heart sped up. I knew that surface to air missiles were usually launched in packages of two. The chances were likely that another missile was already in the air coming straight at me. As the adrenaline pumped through my veins, my thumb traveled down to the button that would release my chaff and flares. At the same time, I thought about pushing my aircraft into a series of steep climbs and dives to avoid the missile. I had time to do neither. What happened to the next click, or the next tick of a second, I'm not sure. Wilbur would later tell me that he had screamed over the radio, "Missiles in the air." I never heard him. What I did hear was a thunderous roar that almost shattered my eardrums. Then came a blow like nothing I had ever felt. It was like getting rear-ended by an 18-wheeler with a rocket tied to its front grille. The missile had found its mark. A burst of flames and intense heat spread through my cockpit. I began to pitch and roll wildly. I felt as if a giant hand had reached down, grabbed me with brute force, and shaken me in a frenzy. What was left of my plane was like a straw in the wind, totally out of control. For all of its space age electronics, its supersonic speed, its defensive powers, the F-16 is not perfect. In the blink of an eye, it can be turned from the prince of the skies into a burning scrap heap of wire and twisted metal. The missile had blindsided me, coming up through the cloud cover below. It had struck the plane's underbelly, hitting one of the fuel tanks and cutting my F-16 in two. It took me another moment to understand. The nose in the cockpit had broken away, and I was now in the free fall to Earth as I spun out of control. I worried about blacking out from the sudden and unexpected G-forces. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but D.E. Raptor, former Air Force.
Did they do a movie about this? I thought they did a movie about this.
Top Gun?
No, I could have sworn they did a movie about this incident. There was a movie about this incident. I could have sworn it was.
Not sure.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know if it's about this one, but there was a pilot who got shot down, who they rescued. Did they rescue him or he died?
Oh, he was rescued. I'm pretty sure it was this story because it was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
In Bosnia. I'm pretty sure it might have been this story. The gentleman that's telling that story. I think it might have been based on this story here.
Right. But that if you look at that airplane, the engine is like just behind the cockpit, and that's where the missile probably hit, because the fuel tank is right above. Well, there's one tank right above, and then the rest in the wings. And when he said it was cut in half, and the heat from the fuel tank, I figured the top tank was one that got hit. But if that missile had come like, I don't know, probably about another 3 feet forward, right through his seat, right through his seat, where he's been gone.
I'm just shocked that thing didn't go up into an instantaneous, flame ball and just
explode.
totally incinerate that dude right there.
He must have dumped a lot of fuel while he was up there then.
No, by that time, that tank should have been empty.
Right.
Because I don't know if you know on a jet airplane how the fuel flows.
Yeah.
That tank goes out first, unless he got a tank, unless he's got a ox tank. If he's carrying a tank on the bottom, then that one goes out first, then the top tank, and then the wing tanks.
Yeah.
So there'll be just fumes in there, and those fumes are enough to take you out.
Yeah, those fumes are flammable as well. Huh?
That JP4 is like, wow, man. It burns. I'm serious. It burns. But the airplane is a good airplane. That's why he got saved. Serious. The
F-16?
The 15.
Yeah.
The 15 is good.
Is the F-15?
F-16. This is the F-16.
16. The 16 is good too. The 16, difference between the two is one's got 2 engines, one's got 1. One's built for the Navy, one's built for the Air Force. The Navy version is like a multi-role fighter bomber type. You know,
the F-15 Eagle. The F-15 Eagle, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
the 16 has got 1 engine.
It's a formidable plane.
Fight. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dogfight. It's a smaller plane. It's kind of like a sports car. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's kind of like a McLaren for the skies.
Yep. It's a nice airplane, bro. That's why he said he's gone from the Prince of the Skies, because it's a good airplane, man. That airplane was good. I'm serious. I can't say anything. There are some things that every airplane has got its unique shortcomings.
Yeah.
But that airplane built for its time, it's still good now.
What did they have in there? Pratt and Whitney turbofans?
No, GE,
GEs?
bro.
Those are
That
GEs,
100
okay.
engine. That engine was platform for a lot of jet fighters to the Air Force.
Yeah, man.
And I mean, it was. I've seen that. Take the F4, and
which they said was what they thought was a dog.
Supposedly, but that thing you'll see that thing shot to pieces. You know,
can take some shots. But
and
it was a big heavy plane.
Bro. Yeah, engine's still running, man. The engine was good. I'm serious.
Yeah.
The F100 engine, I mean, it was pretty good. The GE engine.
I mean, this is another testament that Soviet-made hardware, Russian-made hardware is still taking out the most advanced U.S. Pieces of equipment. I mean, that's what I took from the article. That a Cub is not that. It's not that advanced of Russian hardware.
The SAM is just shoot, and if you can, you guide it to the target. But it is for the kind of electronics that the U.S. had at the time. That was an embarrassment, I would say. Mm-hmm. To me, it was an embarrassment because you got satellites looking down. You got the airborne AWACS airplane in the air, and that thing is supposed to, from the time you launch that missile, it's supposed to detect it. Mm-hmm. And then you have these 2 F-15, and you might have a P-3 or something else in the area. You're gonna have one low-level airplane looking at the horizon, and then you're gonna have the one high up. It might not be right over you, but that thing can see from 300 miles away something being launched. So the amount of electronics that they had looking down in that area and didn't see anything is really, but like they said, the Serbs fooled them. They just didn't use the radar. They listened for the airplane. And they once you start flying that route, like he was describing, you're gonna pass the area. You might pass it overhead one time and then 3 miles over the next time. So what they did is they listened for that aircraft passing over, and they timed it. They know the speed, and by the time they launched, and they launched with cloud cover, they outsmarted those guys, man.
Yeah, this was built in 1959 or designed in 1959.
Yeah.
You know, for all this talk about, U.S. military superiority, man, I think a full-fledged war, and this is old stuff. a full-fledged war, man. That,
Well,
your ass is gonna get handed to you in a full-fledged fight. We just read an article earlier talking about that.
hey, Mike, I remember, when I was really looking into planes a lot back around the late '80s, early '90s, and I was big into this stuff because I had my roommates in college and all that stuff like that. They were in the Air Force and all that. And I was looking at all this stuff. Yeah, Top Gun was pretty. When that movie first came out, that was live as hell. I remember I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, man. I don't really want to go in the Air Force, but I was thinking because there was a school called Embry-Riddle that was really trying to get me to go there, and that was an aeronautical school at the time. And they were making pilots out of there. So, but it was sexy. It was a sexy film. There's no question about it. They were getting down on those planes. But the thing that I started to see, they started to talk about the Sukhoi aircraft, and being able to do the Cobra maneuvers, and also the Sukhoi 37 and spin around and do all this, vector, the vector technology. I guess they had, thrust vectoring technology they had that the Russians were kind of dealing with. And I remember I was watching a colonel actually on a film who was saying, at this point in time, I am not prepared to say that the Russians have better aircraft. He was basically saying then, I wasn't prepared to say it, but he was saying that these guys have turned the corner on us for all practical purposes. I'm not prepared to say yet, meaning that he was thinking, well, I'm not prepared to say because I'm on camera here, but these Ruskies basically were really, they had turned the corner, man. They were developing better aircraft. And we're talking about now going into the late 80s, going into the 90s. And we're not talking about just, the Foxbat and all that. We're talking about, the newer stuff. And not the Fulton, the MiG-Fulcrum, the 29, but now we're talking about this Sukhoi 37 and all these different aircraft that were able to do a lot of really, really advanced stuff that we weren't. Our planes weren't doing. Even though they were doing practice runs on the YF 22 and 23s when these planes were in development, they still were not at the level of where these guys had already had it. So even when they came out with the F-22, Raptor, that aircraft was not superior to what the Russians had, and we're going back now 25 years, damn near 30 years, 25 years or so. So yeah, I think we've been kind of behind the eight ball on some of this stuff for a minute. I think the only thing that we do have right now is supersonic, super speed aircraft that we've developed, and maybe we're thinking that's going to take everybody else out. But I don't know what the and we have some stealth aircraft that some of the other countries have not really gotten involved with. But I think that's that's advantage. It's that has certain advantages. But I think for fleets, we're not that robust. And with the F-35, a lot of people saying that plane's a dog, man. People, they're not impressed with that plane that much. They think the plane can be taken out pretty easily. So I don't know what to say about our planes and so forth, but I think there's a lot of technology that can knock us out of the box, drones and so forth. So I don't know how we would fare in that type of environment. They do say it comes down to pilot experience and who's got the best pilots, who has the best pilots as well. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I don't know where we are in this, but we're not as far ahead as many would like to say we are.
I mean,
let's compare. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it was like about a month or so ago. You guys had a hangout where you were talking about U.S. drones being taken down by Iran. I mean, again, these supposed to be extremely sophisticated, high-tech equipment, but yet, kind of getting taken down. It's the equivalent of shooting arrows at a plane.
Yeah, they intercepted the drone signal and played what they call a man-in-the-middle attack, MITM. Man in the middle means it spoofed the drone into its frequency and actually commanded it down to the ground and landed it cleanly, as if it owned it. So the U.S. military lost control over it because it didn't. The way the drones are designed is that that's their weakness. Is the communications portion, communication stack.
I mean, for someone that's in cybersecurity like yourself, I mean, would you say that this is a big vulnerability in general? Is, you know, in the U.S. in general, just cybersecurity in general, this is a pretty big vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. See, other countries that are weaker have to focus on asymmetric warfare, and cyber warfare is the number one skill set that they can actually build up from a human capital standpoint without wasting a whole lot of money. There are many books out there on Amazon that will teach you how to break into systems and so on and so forth. But there's all types of intelligence sharing between those states. You know, Russia and China and Iran and Pakistan, India, Israel. They're all sharing all types of cyber warfare capabilities, and I would say probably Israel is probably the top notch in the Middle East, next to Iran. But then again, they have a lot of money to dump into that type of stuff. And they've been doing you know, electronic warfare capabilities since the inception of their state. You know, when they first attacked Egypt in the '67 war, they attached blades to the bottom of their planes and popped all their phone line cables across the roads, so that they could not call out.
Oh, that's interesting. Did not know.
Yeah, they flew their planes low enough to pop all the cables along the routes and disable their communications. So by the time the Israelis had invaded, it was too late for them to even respond. So they've been doing that for a long time.
Wow. Yeah. No. Again, you know, for the sheer amount of money that gets spent on the defense budget, and you know, all these black projects, the stuff we don't know about. I mean, I mean, these stories tonight are kind of like, well, you got these other countries that would be considered technologically inferior to the U.S. However, they seem to be designing capabilities that they had capabilities that seem to be very much designed to take the U.S. out and nobody else.
Oh yeah. And just about everybody in the G20 has these capabilities. All of them. They all have these capabilities. I would argue that it probably expands maybe further out of the G20. I would probably say now that most of Latin American countries have this capability, maybe excluding that of Cuba, since they don't seem to really focus too much on all of that stuff. They focus more on just the electronic portion of sound cannons and stuff like that.
Well, I think Cuba's probably more or less relying on the fact that they're in the U.S.'s backyard, and so they always have a big brother there, you know.
Well, yeah, I think they look at demolition work though, right? So you know, how to take out you know, basic infrastructure, utility grids and stuff like that, if they were to go to war, since they still have a considerable amount of intelligence officers over on the U.S. side.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. You know, I think the big takeaway from tonight is that from the articles, at least the ones that I've been purview to, is that, you know, it seems to be, at least militarily and technologically, and we're maybe not quite as advanced as, you know, the talking points would be out here. You turn to me, everybody says, "Oh, well, you know, U.S. is supreme," and I do think there is certainly some credibility when it comes to aircraft. And I think you guys I think you said it. I don't know who said it earlier, but talked about the speed. I mean, again, the U.S. does probably have the fastest aircraft, but again, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, since we just read the story and the pilot got completely blindsided by some 40-year-old technology.
Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Iran back in 2008 or 2009 had jammed up CIA satellites, and basically outsmarted the CIA.
Yeah, you can outsmart the CIA. Those guys are.
CIA has basically they're their own little military operation. So
they are
kind of a paramilitary.
That's exactly how they were operating in Iraq. I came across a few of them when I was in Iraq. I mean, that's pretty much the U.S. military did their thing and they did theirs.
It seems like they screw up a lot, man. It seems like those guys just, they're good at creating havoc, but they seem like they can't, they seem to screw up a lot. That's what I see from the CIA. They seem to screw up a lot.
It's the nature of the kinds of wars that the U.S. has been engaged in for the past 20 years or so, where you're dealing with more like guerrilla fighters. You're dealing with homegrown elements. You're not really, this isn't something where folks have these really well built out countries and you can go in and do subterfuge and espionage and stuff like that and take them down in a more subtle manner. No, you're forced to actually get on the ground and fight these people.
Yeah, but as far as speed is concerned, if you're flying at Mach 9, close to Mach 10, or something like that, that's fast. That's going from like LA to Oahu, Hawaii, in 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes or something like that. It's pretty fast. So I don't know, man. Maybe we could outrun missiles and stuff. I don't know. That's pretty fast. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. There's no missile at this time. The Russians are probably the only one who is closest. Well, from what we know, in the public purview, the Russians are the farthest ahead in creating these hypersonic, not supersonic, but hypersonic weapons, and it can put you at a disadvantage unless you have this kind of like Space Force capabilities where you are looking down at satellite. You can tell when these things are launched, and you have the electronic capability. Your satellite is programmed to, if it's not yours, take it out electronically. If you can't do that, you're in trouble.
Well, EM pulses, we know this and all that. That can jam and jack up a lot of stuff, man. They can jack up a lot of stuff. So there's counterbalances to a lot of this stuff as well. So the EM pulse and bad boy's got a lot of uses, and it's effective at disrupting a lot of things.
To a hypersonic missile, though.
I might see. I don't know how we could fully apply that technology there, but I don't know. It's a possibility. I would think it might. Maybe it could potentially affect it being able to track properly or something of that nature.
Well, that thing is it's pretty autonomous. It doesn't even need to track it. It doesn't need any further assistance. Once you set the guidance into it, it's already autonomous. It's already
okay, but that means it's tracking onto a target. Am I correct?
It's tracking to a grid, but it doesn't need to hit the target. It actually detonates before it even hits the target. So, if it's going after
but it would have to be within a proximity of it. It would have to be somewhat close around. Would I be correct in saying that as well?
You would, but it also carries dummy warheads. So that's to actually throw off any sort of radar. So now you're talking about having to guesstimate which hypersonic missile is actually the real one, the authentic one. If you're in the carrier, if it's designed to take out a carrier group, those things are dead already. That carrier group is dead. There is no response that the Navy can actually respond with. It's just too fast. It's not enough time to respond.
I'm sure we got something to it. I just know I just know that we have hypersonic aircraft that are moving at ridiculous speeds. I mean, we did have the X-15 experimental jet fighter back in 1953 that flew at Mach 6, Mach 7, something like that. So that was back in 53.
Yeah, but that one is only flying
What
point
do
A
you
to
think?
point B.
What
If
do you
you can
think? What do you
maneuver.
think we got now? What do you think we have
You
now?
can,
I'm
well,
just
you gotta
saying.
have maneuverability. You
Yeah,
gotta
but
add
there's no human beings
maneuverability
inside
into
that
this
thing.
thing.
Which one? In the X-15 jet experiment? Yeah, there was a pilot in that plane. It actually was. You can look at it on YouTube, man. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, but
It
you're
was-
talking about something that's coming without notice. So you have no idea where this thing is going to come from, because it, like Putin said last month, it could be sea launched, it could be air launched, and it could be land launched. You have no idea where this is going to come from, and by the time you figure it out,
that's formidable, and it's moving at what, Mach 7 or so. So
20,000 miles per hour.
So 7 times.
And you don't know the,
seven.
because you got this.
That's Mach 6. That's like Mach 6, almost Mach 6, Mach 7. That's crazy speed. That's hypersonic. That's crazy speed. That's crazy speed.
And if you got your electronics on board, that's going to fly into pre-programmed waypoints. That's going to fool is specifically designed to fool your tracking system. Then it's hard to hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to actually lock onto it, and this thing changes direction just as fast as it's traveling. So
Yeah, it's no joke, man. That's no joke. It's no joke. But like I said, we got that Aurora. We got that Aurora aircraft. We have the money to develop that kind of thing. I think the Russians didn't have the with the fall of the Soviet Union, they didn't have the money. They didn't have the money to develop this type of thing. So that's why their aircrafts are and their weapons are a little cheaper, but they're very effective. Russians are smart. They're pretty smart people. So they know how to do a lot with a little.
Well, our problem is that we have so much technology and so much money that we tend to waste it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of money gets diverted. I think we have so many of the black programs.
That's absolutely right. Look, I was in Aviano. I was in Aviano we're up close to the border with Yugoslavia, and well, I know about the 555, triple nickel. Some of our F4s flew with them. We flew with those guys, the 16s too. But you see some of the things that go on the base. You know what I'm saying? That okay, we have a budget. Say our budget was 300 million for the year, and at the end of the year, we only spent, say, come July, August, September, July, we only spent 250 million. Every morning at 6 a.m., 15 airplanes taking off. Because they're trying to burn through all that other 50 million in cash.
right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
the 50 million is going back to the Pentagon. It's being burnt through.
you have to understand.
Push
The military has
damaged the airplane. They push it overboard.
But you know what I was going to say? The military has. Oh, okay.
They're not going to recapture that airplane. They're going to push it overboard. If it comes to stop, and something is wrong with the airplane, and another one is coming in, they're going to say go around and come back around. Somebody get something up there and push that airplane overboard.
The military has unlimited money. They have unlimited dollars. For anything else that you have, we don't have a healthcare plan. We don't have a healthcare plan. We don't. Okay, you can sit here and say, healthcare. Oh, what are you guys talking about? We're screwing people. But yet, 2.3 trillion is unaccounted for. It almost doesn't pass the giggle test. This is so ridiculous. But yeah, that's what we have going on. They have unlimited dollars. You cannot get a healthcare plan. That may cost you, $1 trillion or so, but you got 2.3 trillion unaccounted for through the military.
Bro, look,
you guys explain that one to me.
During the last two wars,
unlimited dollars.
But
They have
the last,
unlimited money to do what they want.
during the Iran-Iraq war, where they're fighting, Iran and Iraq were fighting each other. The 2001 Bush #1 war. If you see the cans, I don't know if you know what a can is, right? Right. You go.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you see the cans with $100 bills stacked floor to ceiling, a can, I could stand inside some of the cans. The well, up to they're double cans. Some of them are double that are like 8 feet across. The width of an aircraft underbelly, and they are 4 feet high, filled with money. This money didn't go through the banking system. Brand new New York printed dollars going
you had that
to
in
the
Iraq.
Middle East.
You had captains and so forth, in hangars. That we're talking about hangars that that are going back, 50 to 100 yards, and there was skids of fucking C notes, freshly minted, just sitting skids, bro, to the roof, skids.
Where's that money going?
Literally tons of money.
A lot of it to pay off the warlords.
Tons of money. Skids.
Thank you. That was one of them. But a lot of it went there, disappeared out the door, ended up back in the US.
I tell you what, I ain't gonna front. If I was up in there, I'd be like, I'm gonna get me a skid. A skid is mine. That ass is mine. That skid is mine. I'm gonna get one of them. For real. That's what I would be doing. You got dollars to the roof, literally packed to the rafters for 100 yards? Do you guys understand what kind of cash that we're talking about? I'm gonna get me a skid. I'm gonna get me just one skid, man. I'm gonna get that out of there somehow. I'm gonna pay some. One of them skids are gone. They're gone.
Well, I used to refer to the Iraq War in the early days of it as the Wild West, because pretty much you could pretty much do whatever the hell you wanted to out there. There were no rules of engagement. You can shoot somebody, they look at you cross-eyed. I mean, there was just so much money floating around for the taking. Folks were getting 200 grand, no tax free to do little shiesty jobs for KBR. I knew folks that were getting 600 grand for like a year of service.
Oh yeah.
Tax-free.
That was big.
They were doing this stuff. They were doing this stuff like back to back. Just cleaning up. So this is just one level where we've seen like just massive levels of corruption, and we're not even. This is not even a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money that has completely went unaccounted for. I think there was a story they even talked about. They had weapons that went. I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure there was a major story came out a few years ago that was about crates of weapons that went unaccounted for, just disappeared. Nobody don't know. No one doesn't know where they went.
just like recently in Iraq, ISIS, it's just came across these tanks and these all this weapons cache, and just this formidable force now. Somebody has to go in there and do something about it.
Man, I'm telling you, I would have grabbed me one of them skids, baby. I keep talking about, man, my family, we would have been like, don't worry. All right.
You have to be a little bit more precise when you say skids, man. I know we had a hangout yesterday about black mental health and guys wearing their pants sagging, man. Different type of skids.
Nah,
oh
if I
oh my God.
I was a 19-year-old kid, so I was really, very young, wet behind the ears, didn't know nothing, was getting my crash course in foreign policy. But if I could do it all over again, knowing what I know now, yeah. Yeah.
I'd have been up in the military guarding that money, and some of that I would have had. Okay, because I got to figure you take one of those skids, that's maybe about $15-20 million.
Yeah.
Where are you going to spend it? I mean, they
Am I
know
going to spend it?
They
I'm
are.
not
They
gonna,
know all the serial numbers.
I'm not necessarily going to. You think they really tracking every single one of them serial numbers, Sam?
Oh
No,
yeah.
no, they
Oh
didn't.
yeah.
Man,
They didn't.
then I tell you what, I'd be one of the biggest washers you've ever seen. I'd be washing that money like no tomorrow. And that money would come out one way and come out another way clean. And I'd be investing that in properties, real estate. That money would be, I'd be a generational dude straight up after that. Don't worry about it, kids. I got you for the next 250 years.
They'll stop at every liquor store in your neighborhood, like, let me see your money real quick in that register. Oh.
Nah, man, I'd wash that shit somewhere in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd roll up on one of them Saudi princes, wash this shit.
I mean,
Like,
just given sort of what the conversation has been about tonight. I mean, you consider the nature of warfare and the technology that comes from it. You would think that as much money as the U.S. spent in Iraq over that 10-year period, prior to the SOFA agreement, I mean, you would have thought Iraq would have been ironclad, locked down, ain't no other country coming up in there. But again, as we've seen over the last couple years or so, I mean, it would have just, I mean, it's they've been forging relationships with people that that would the U.S. would consider its enemies. But again, I mean, I think at the height of the war in Iraq, they were spending upwards of about, I think it was about $30-40 billion a month.
Wow.
Man, they said the first 2 years we spent over $1 trillion. You're never going to get an accurate figure on that. You're never getting it. You're never going to get it. You're never going to get that. Because if they really sit down and you really look at that, you're talking about capital crimes. I mean, this war was pure thievery. That's what put us behind the 8 ball, man. A lot of people say, "Well, we blew up so much money there."
And you know what? A big part of that money that was spent, a part of it was that if you went to Iraq between 2003, 2004, you essentially went there with nothing. I mean, they didn't even they couldn't even give you decent armor. You didn't even have armored vehicles. They had the old school fiberglass Humvees they had folks running around with. In fact, if you went there between 2003 and 2005, well, maybe early 2005, you actually still had to do convoys from Kuwait into Iraq, which is what I had to do. And they, I mean, just troop movement, personnel movement, logistics. I mean, when we got there, we didn't have nothing. We had to wait probably about a good 2-3 months. They took all of our vehicles from us so they could go take them and put armor on them, even though it did next to nothing other than turn them into giant saunas. But but I mean, they spent money, and they pretty much, and these defense companies came in charging absorbent amounts of money. Mm-hmm. Just to give soldiers, little sappy plates. They used to put these little sappy plates in your body armor that they crack if you took 3 shots from an AK or whatever, and you had to get some new ones.
What does that mean that they crack?
So what happens is, if you had the old school body armor that they sent you to Iraq with, they actually used to put plates in them. So you basically had the vest, but the vest alone itself wasn't protection. It might protect you against some shrapnel, but it wasn't solid enough to protect you against any small arms fire or anything like that. So they had to give you plates. So you had plates, one for the front and one for the back. And you put these heavy ass 15-20 pound plates in the vest, one in the front, one in the back. And again, they were pretty fragile. They only took about 2-3 shots. They only took about 2-3 shots from an AK before they cracked, and they were completely useless. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's different levels of ballistic protection.
They had nothing, brother. I mean, one of the brothers just put it up. He just put it up in there, and we had nothing. When I went there, I agree with what he just said. We had nothing. We didn't have no armor We there was nothing, brother. I mean, if you go back and read some of those early articles about the war in Iraq and how service members were sent over there, they were underfunded, they had very little equipment. I mean,
some of them had to buy their own flak jackets.
We would have to have a conversation offline, and I could tell you guys some real stories.
No, that's fine.
But I would say this much. I mean, if you just do a Google search, you will see stories about service members going to Iraq back in the early days of the war where they didn't have the proper equipment. I mean,
but I tell you what, I would have had the proper equipment to get me one of them skids. See, I'm gonna tell you that right now. Cause see, I knew about all the effery that was going on there. I would have had the proper equipment to go grab me one of them skids. And you was a sucker if you would sit up there watching that money and didn't take any. You was a sucker.
Sucker laid in a sucker skid.
Sucker laid with a sucker skid. I'd have been up in there. I'd have been all up in the sauce.
Yeah. Bulletproof Tone said something in the chat, man. That I've been talking about this for a minute. It says that war is a hustle. We need to get in on it. I brought this up to the ministry a couple of years ago, and said we should have our own contracting company.
I 100% agree because I know too many white boys that clean the hell up as the contractors. I mean they were getting these no bid contracts. I mean there's a whole system you go through now to get in the contract, to get the government contracts and all that. But man, I know a lot of white guys that have been cleaning up for years as contractors, man. And for the life of me, I don't know why we don't get enough brothers together, where we can form these contracting companies. Because I mean, and the sad part about it, they have money set aside just for black folks, black folks.
Yep,
that's what I've been bringing up, and I had saw a military expo. There's a few channels I follow, and they had these pickup trucks that they, these Toyota Hiluxes in the Middle East that they would just build up, man, into armored anti-tank wolf packs, what they call them. You get a dozen or so of these Toyota Hiluxes, and you bolt on ATGMs on the back of it, man, and they were tearing these suckers out the frame in Syria. These T-55 old Russian tanks that the Syrians had, man, and the Syrians didn't have a response to it. Although you took one round from that tank inside that Toyota, that thing was done for, but because it didn't have any armor on it. But the point that I'm making here is that there is a considerable market for these sort of vehicles in the Middle East and Africa, because tanks with treads are just too damn heavy, especially main battle tanks. They're too heavy to ride on sand and all these other things. The Israeli Defense Forces figured this out when they were fighting with Egypt, that their tanks were, the Egyptian tanks were getting stuck in sand, and that they turned their steel treads into rubber treads, and that allowed them to have considerable weight drop and allowed them to ride on top of softer conditions. Ground conditions.
That's why they switched to those. If you notice, in the latter part of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they started using those MRAPs. That was why. Goes back to the earlier conversation about tanks being dangerous and not necessarily the most efficient place. Like you can't even bring them into Afghanistan.
Right.
It's too mountainous there. So I mean, that's why they had the. Yeah, that's why they switched to the MRAPs. But no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, if brothers want to make some real money on some defense contract, and I know I didn't mention this yesterday because we were talking about mental health, but I should have threw this out there. If for brothers that are, they're in the fields of healthcare, stuff like that, like if you're like a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA, man, I've met some folks that getting contracts going overseas, just doing like foreign medical services for these folks, and they getting paid guaps of money. Yeah. I mean, it just it's free money for tank. I mean, the process you go through to get certified and to get your number and all that stuff. Yeah, it can be a little lengthy, but once you in, you in.
They have the largest MRAP vendor in the United States for the police department is Lenco, which is based in Springfield, Massachusetts. And they have contracts up the wazoo, man. They can't even keep up with them. And they basically just take a F650 or F550 for a pickup truck and take the bed off and everything else and reconstruct it to what they want it to be. Keep all the engine components the same, but all they do is they switch the cab out, put some armor on it, and then they ship it out.
I mean, yeah, because they're pretty. I mean, you don't need these vehicles to go super fast. I mean, they kind of need to be like these really mobile stations, if you will. You don't need them to go fast. They need to be movable. They obviously need to be mobile, but they don't need to be fast or nothing. They need to be stable in a place. Serve as a place where maybe service members can be posted up at if you're doing some other kinds of things or whatever environment you're in. But again, if you brought this up, I'm curious to see what brother said. I'm curious.
I brought this up and Dr. Phoenix, dude, they laughed at me. I was laughed out of a hangout. I won't mention which one. I was laughed out of a hangout. People thought I was a joke. I didn't know what I was talking about. I had watched a military expo in Africa, and the problems that they were having with Chinese hardware because it was cheap. They can't afford American hardware. They train with the Americans, but they can't afford American hardware. So they went to the Chinese and bought their secondhand stuff. And that's, you had helicopters falling out of the sky, Chinese battle tanks stalling on the field, what do you call it? Replicated AK-47s jamming up. AKs are not supposed to jam. So this is the type of stuff that they were running into, and they were like, Africa has to stop building its own weapons. And I said, well, why aren't we out there supplying? Why isn't ADOS putting together a package to send over there to African states in the sub-Saharan and giving them the considerable ability?
I mean, brothers that got trades. If you were if you were an electrician or plumbing, man, they were hiring all these. They were hiring third world nationals from like India and Pakistan and the Philippines to do all kinds of stuff when I was in Iraq. I mean, hell, to do your dry cleaning, they had Filipinos doing it. We just drop a stuff off, we drop a laundry off and come pick it up like a day later. I mean, there was like all kinds of contracts. I mean, all of this was through KBR, of course. But again, I mean, if you wanted to do that, if you were in the trades, if you were, electrician, you were a plumber. I mean, there's just so much damn money you can make off just doing government contracting because they need those kinds of stuff. Especially at these embassies and places like that. If you're a bit of interest and you're willing to get out there, man, do some travel, man. There's tons of money. I think I talked about this before on one of my, on one of the other panels about when I was in Australia. I met cats that were going over to Australia that were plumbers and electricians were getting job offers for like $200,000 a year.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
I mean, this was Australian money. I mean, it's pretty much a one-to-one exchange between the AUD and the USD, but this was like about 5-6 years ago. But again, I mean, for the contracting, pretty much everything you can think of, they need somebody for it.
Yep. All right, man. Let's shut it down, man. Thank you all for joining us. If you have not hit the like button, please hit it now. Share the video if possible, as well as hit that notification bell so you get all the updates for the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community page. We'll be back tomorrow for Lionel's Black Crypto Talk at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 7:30 Central Standard Time. And we are gone. Adios.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.